I don't see. Oh, there you are. Okay. Can you hear me?
Here.
Okay, there you are.
Here we
Okay.
go.
I'm like, well, here's the thing. I was like, oh, I want breakfast. Oh, let me go to the breakfast place and I'll be back in time. And so I'm like, oh, shoot, I'm in the car. And I was like, can I start this from the car? So
You
luckily,
can see, gotta love technology.
yes.
Uh-oh.
Luckily, I'm not that far from home. So I'll be home in a second. And then I tried to call my assistant who didn't answer. I called the wrong phone. She didn't answer. And I'm like, okay, let me hurry up and figure this out. So the question is, well, we're already broadcasting, so
Okay.
I can't see participants and drive, but so I'm sure people will be chiming in a second because I saw registrations this morning even.
Oh, wow, great.
So I can't believe I did that. You know what? And my gut kept telling me to double check. And I kept checking the time on purpose multiple times. I was like, it's on my calendar. I know it's right.
I get so nervous. I keep checking because I'm worried about the time thing. I relook.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay, they're 2 hours ahead, right? Okay, make sure. Because I'm like, I don't want just, it's like.
Right.
I
And
set
so,
2 alarms because I don't want to miss them.
right. And so
Yeah.
here's the thing. This is recording, and I can't stop and start the recording because I'm driving. So people gonna laugh at us when they actually watch the recording, and I know there are gonna be people that watch the recording. So for those of you who might be watching the recording, or anybody that's on right now, I screwed up the time in my calendar, and I went to pick up pancakes. So,
Oh my goodness.
so I'm in the car. I will be back in business online. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to be able to log off the phone because
You're the host, unless you put me as the
host.
co-host or something.
Let's see if this light doesn't change, I can check.
Okay.
Because it's a red light in front of me. But I'm literally 5 minutes from home, so.
Okay, it'll be fine because the beginning, this is just brief introductions, and I can introduce myself if that's easier. And then we'll be going right into it. I have some parts of it that are going to be interactive, but that's going to be towards the middle. You'll probably be home by then. But I can also see the chats to look at that as well to see their responses. So.
Yep. And we do have, I just looked while I was sitting at the light, we do have 2 people on. So good morning for those of you that are logging in now. We're a couple minutes before start time, and I've done this before, I somehow screwed up the time when I put it in my calendar. And so I went to go pick up pancakes because I didn't feel like cooking breakfast. And luckily, Desiree texted me and was like, I'm on, and I'm like, oh shit. So I'm in the car, I'm driving, but we will proceed. Thank God for technology.
That's right.
So, yep. And we had, last I checked, which was yesterday, we had 28 people registered.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so I know a great number of people should be coming on. I just heard somebody chime in.
Okay. I'm going to do something real quick. I'm going to mute myself briefly and I'll be right back, okay?
Okay. So for those of you who are waiting and the person who just chimed in, whoever that might be, I'm in the car because I screwed up the time in my calendar. And I went to get pancakes. And okay, that's Sinette. I know that would be you. Can you mute yourself, please? I tried to call you, Sinette, to be like, can you start this seminar? But thankfully, I can start it from the Zoom app on my phone. So we're going to be starting shortly. I'm less than 5 minutes from home. I know it's right at 10 o'clock right now. Actually, Sinette, unmute yourself if you mute it. Can you tell me how many participants we have on? Because I don't want to wreck.
Yeah, let me look. There
we have
are
28.
There are
Four,
three.
okay. We have 28 people registered, so we're going to wait a couple of minutes to give people more time, and then Desiree just stepped away from her computer for a second to go do something. So for those of you who are on, we will also be announcing really soon best practices and recommendations webinar on security. So I know many of you, if you've already applied, have already submitted a security plan, and you went through some details of security plan, but I have a security expert that's going to give you like best practices and steps and different things that you can do to kind of implement your security plan and beef it up and make it even better. So we're actually working through the details of that presentation right now. So that should be announced in the next week. We just have to work out the schedule. And then we're also going to be doing some security assessments for people if they so desire to have one. So that will be coming up after we do those webinars. Desiree, let me know when you're back and when you're ready.
Okay, I'm back. How are we doing?
We're doing great. So everyone, okay, I am pulling into my yard. I'm going to sit in the driveway for a second so I don't become dark when I pull into the garage. So everyone, good morning and welcome to our series, our HR series. Today's session is on onboarding, retention, and I forget the third one.
Performance management.
Performance management, thank you. So for those of you who were not with us before, if you missed the first session and you're interested in watching the video, because we are recording these, we actually have the video available on our Dropbox. Sinette, can you put the link to our Dropbox in the chat, to that folder in the chat? It's in that saved document where I have the shortcut for links. And so you can go and catch up in case you missed it, because it's a lot of really important information on HR law that you all need to know. So Desiree Henderson her business is For Hire HR. She is phenomenal and very well versed on all things HR. Even I learned some things from our last session. I was like, oh, I probably should have done that before I hired my first employee. So wherever you are in this journey, whether you're starting out, you already have a business, or you're planning to start a business, she is going to make sure that you have everything that you need to be successful. So with that being said, I am going to mute myself and turn off my camera and turn it over to Desiree.
Thank you, Trisha. Good morning, everyone. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation here and share my screen. Let's see where. Oh no, Trisha, when you get it's saying it's disabled me from sharing my screen. Can you?
Oh, I don't know how I did that. Let me.
Did I click on the wrong?
I don't think I can change it, but I can make you host. That might. On the settings that I'm looking at, I'll make you host.
Okay.
Then that way you should be able to do anything you need to do. Because the phone didn't give me enough settings to do that.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay.
All right, there we go. We're back on. We're back on. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So, as Tricia said, this is the second part of our series. So, pretty much what we're doing each week, each couple of weeks, each session is that we are going through the employee life cycle and kind of taking you through we started off with the employment basics, which are the laws, and kind of getting that down for federal and state laws that you want to be aware of when you are an employer before you start a business, and kind of taking it through methodically in regards to the steps that we're gonna that you have with an employee. So as we get into that, just a kind of a quick disclaimer here, the seminar, I'm an HR professional, as Tricia said. I've been in HR 20 years now and got a chance to work in just about every aspect of it. I've worked with, starting off, I've done payroll, I've done benefits, I've done workers' comp, I've done compensation, employee relations, I've worked in labor environment, nonprofits, corporate, large companies, small family businesses. And so I've had a chance to experience a lot of different things that can happen in a company. I never say I've experienced about everything, because there's always something that happens. Flashback to earlier this week, one of my clients, one of their employees who does deliveries on their routes, they decided they were going to steal a dog on their route. So that was a new one for me. So I say that there's always something new that happens. So anyway, but I am not an attorney. I do have multiple certifications. I do have my master's degree, but not an attorney. So this is not intended to be any type of legal advice or representation, but based off of my knowledge, experience, skills, and best practices. Great. So as we get into it, as I'm talking about the employee life cycle, we take a look at it. You kind of dissect into three major sections. We have our employee recruitment and selection. That's our onboarding, everything up until through hire and kind of orientation for the kind of like the first 90 to 60 days of employment, that whole process. And then we have the employee with us, employee management. That's going to be our performance management, which is our next seminar. Employment management, part of that's going to be disciplinary and things like that. And also during that time, we have the benefits that we have and everything that while they're employed with us, that we work with that employee. And then at the point that they're no longer going to be with us, whether we initiate it as the employer or they initiate as an employee, we have employee separation and everything that needs to be familiar and known in regards to that. So this morning, we are going to be focusing on employee recruitment and selection. So this morning, we're going to go through the importance of effective hiring. There's the way to hire right and hire wrong. I'll just put it that bluntly. So we want to make sure that from the beginning that we set everything up right. And hiring actually starts before we make the job offer. It starts before we post the job. So we want to make sure that all those steps are done correctly, because that's going to make sure that we hire the best candidate. There's nothing that says, oh, it's perfect and, oh, I have a good feeling about this person, they're going to work out, because there's sometimes even the best process and the best interviews, you just never know. But if we put these things in place, it helps us to, majority of the time at least, be able to make sure that we have the best thing possible to hire effectively, to hopefully get the right candidate the first time. We're going to go through the applicable laws to know. We're going to talk about recruiting and interviewing. Then we'll go to onboarding and retention strategies. Okay, so starting off with employment law, we'll kind of just briefly go through the basics. So a little bit of what we went over in our last seminar were some HR laws that we want to think about. And HR laws, they come from, as many of our laws, they start at the federal level with executive orders and different acts that are proposed and agreed on in Congress. And then a lot of states will either maintain those and have their state departments that support the federal laws, or some states will have additions to those laws. So anytime a state has a law that is going to be more beneficial to the employee, that's different from the state, then that's traditionally allowed and okay. What it can't be is the opposite. So the best example I always use is minimum wage. Minimum wage is like $7.25 an hour. In the state of Illinois, it's in the nines, and depending on where you live, could be a little bit higher depending on the municipality. So those are one of the things that's okay. Now, what the state couldn't do was saying, our state, we're lower income, we think $6.50 is better. They can't do that. They can't do anything that's going to be less beneficial to the employee. So that's how those kind of how those work together. So some of the important departments that we'll talk about in relation to the hiring side of HR practices would be our Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So the Department of Labor we're going to be focusing from them wage and hour related laws. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, those are the laws that are going to be dealing with discrimination, harassment, equal pay, things like that. Internal Revenue Services regarding payments. We're going to get into some things in regards of how employees are paid. That's going to come from the IRS. Because of course, anything dealing with any kind of taxes, they're involved. The Department of Homeland Security is going to be about going through immigration and eligibility to work. And then we have the state departments, the Illinois Department of Labor, Illinois Department of Human Rights, and Illinois Department of Employment Security are other important departments that you're going to want to know for doing business. Okay. So here's to make it easy, right? All the laws just right there. It's like, this is supposed to be easy. So here's a nice quick kind of compilation of some of the main ones. And some of them will go through a little bit more detail this morning, like the Fair Labor Standards Act. But the Fair Labor Standards Act is the federal law that establishes our minimum wages. And now if you were on the last seminar that we did, we went through this in a lot more detail. So this morning, we're just going to really focus on the wage and hour side of it, exemption status, and how someone is paid. Fair Labor Standards Act sets the minimum wage for hourly and salaried employees, and we call that exempt and non-exempt. They set the classifications for those, what we call white collar exemptions. We'll talk through those. Talks about overtime. They also set laws for minor labor and things, but we're just going to focus on just a certain part of it this morning. Okay. And then we have Uniform Services and Employment and Reemployment Act. That's called USERRA. And that's the act that's our servicemen and women. So we're going to be focusing on that and their eligibility to work, and not discriminating based off of whether they're active servicemen or women or not, okay? And then we're gonna go, through Pregnancy Discrimination Act. That's pretty straightforward as regards to what that is. We cannot discriminate on anyone based off of pregnancy, if we suspect they're pregnant, and I've had that before where applicants have come into an interview a good 6-7 months pregnant, or they tell us afterwards, or they tell us that they're newly pregnant. And of course, our tendency, right, in business is think, oh my goodness, I'm going to hire someone that's pregnant. They're going to be here a few months. I'm going to train them, and then they're going to go out on leave. We can't take any of that into consideration. So of course that's protected, because unfortunately there's some employers that have done that. And so now there's laws regarding that. And then we have Immigration Reform and Control Act, known as IRCA. And so, and that's not a clean kind of acronym, right? It sounds a little ugly, but it's longer to say Immigration Reform and Control Act. And that's really our I-9 requirement. That is our eligibility of someone to be able to work in the US, and E-Verify is a portion of that. Another thing that's important to know is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That is supported by and reinforced by the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that's the law that talks about, they have all the discrimination laws. They set the federal protected classes. We'll go through the protected classes for Illinois today, but those are your federal ones. And they have like kind of their basic 5 or 6, and you'll see a lot of states have added on to those. And then we have the Federal Equal Pay Act laws of 1963, 1991. Also, again, anything that has to deal with discrimination also falls under that EEOC. And so here we see that again in regards to the Equal Pay Act. We have the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. And that just says that you cannot discriminate in the workplace on age of anyone 40 and over. I always get the question, why 40? I guess that's, they consider that middle of life and close to being on the other side of the hill, apparently. So yeah, so anyone that's older in the workplace, you cannot make work decisions based off of, it's just best practice not to base anything off age regardless. Then we have our Americans with Disabilities Act, and that's also under the EEOC. That just says that you cannot discriminate against anyone based off their disability, and it talks about reasonable accommodation. We are going to go deeper into that today and how that relates to employment. That's a very important one to know. Some of these you may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with hiring? Well, there's several laws that already start protections for employees before they're even an employee, as they're an applicant and candidate for positions. And we'll talk about that. And then one of the last ones, kind of, it's not necessarily a law per se, but that's establishment of another type of classification of whether someone is employee versus 1099, and that's reinforced also by the IRS, and some also have state agencies that have that, but they're the main one because anytime that there's taxes involved, they're involved. Okay. For the state departments, we have the Illinois Human Rights Act, and that is going to be kind of like your state EEOC. They are going to enforce laws in regards to hiring, disability, discrimination, and harassment as well. And if applicants or employees have any complaints, typically they're going to start with the Illinois Department of Human Rights. They also establish mandatory training for sexual harassment as well. We have HB 834, the no salary history law is what it's called. That's something that was approved and signed into law last year and effective this year. This is important for recruiting and for interviewing because it talks about not being able to ask applicants about their salary history. So that if you have that in your applications, if you're asking in an interview, that is going to be now that is considered illegal. So that's something that's important to know. Illinois also has their own version of the Equal Pay Act. Theirs went into place in 2003, and that really says that for the same type of work with the same type of experience for men and women, that you cannot pay women a lesser wage due to their gender. So I want to make sure that you're paying men and women the same wage for like jobs and like experience. And that's reinforced by the Illinois Department of Labor. That's going to be your state Department of Labor. You have the Employee Classification Act, and again, that talks about classifications for exemption status and independent contractors, so making sure employees are classified correctly. And then we have the Job Opportunities for Qualified Applicants Act, also reinforced by the Illinois Department of Labor. The fancy kind of title really just kind of gets down to saying that employers cannot ask about criminal history. And a lot of states have different versions of that. They call it either ban the box or, you know, criminal history laws and things like that. And it just says that you can, they don't want people being discriminated against based off of them having some type of criminal history, because they feel like there are certain groups of people that tend to be affected more than others by this in regards to criminal history. So there's some positions you can ask sooner than later. For example, if you're, you know, have certain government contracts and things like that, you can ask immediately. Like, for example, I used to work for a nonprofit that was social services agency. So we could ask for that on the application. In this situation, it says until you've kind of identified the candidate to be qualified for the position or they're offered the position, at that point, you can inquire about certain parts of their criminal history. So they just don't want people being ruled out initially, like on the application and saying, oh, this person marked that they have a felony or what have you, we're not even going to interview them. They really want you to focus more on the person's experience and things like that before considering them not eligible, and base it on job-related factors and not anything in regards to that. Okay, our next slide here goes through the protected classes I spoke about. So the protected classes, again, federally fall under the EEOC. And if you recall me saying that many states will adapt their own and add to that, and Illinois followed suit with that as well. So these are all of their different protected classes and things that you want to be aware of that falls under the Human Rights Act. So of course, age we talked about. Citizenship status in regards to employment. You know, there are some employers that say, I just want to hire U.S. citizens. I only want to hire U.S. citizens. That would be illegal. If someone is able to provide the right information for the I-9 form, and that doesn't always mean U.S. citizenship, they're eligible to be hired somewhere based off of that part. Now, they still have to be clear through, their knowledge, skills, and experience and things like that. But, they have to be able to, you can't discriminate based off that. Marital status, which seems weird, but marital status is not just whether, you can't discriminate against someone based off of whether they're married, not married, single, divorced, or what have you. Orders of protection, the race, sex, meaning gender, unfavorable military discharge, and not many states have this one. There are some people that ask for, did you have an honorable discharge from the military? That's sometimes on applications. Illinois says it doesn't matter. We're not discriminated based on that. What does that have to do with the job? And that's a lot of times what protected classes do. It takes out every other thing that sometimes we as humans may use to judge someone, and says, without all these removed, let's just look at someone based off of their ability to do the job, ability to stay employed at the job, based off of these other different attributes. Ancestry, the color of their skin, military status, physical and mental disability is protected, religion, practice thereof, the sexual harassment, arrest record, which we talked about not too long ago, familial status, national origin, pregnancy, also from retaliation, and then sexual orientation and gender identity. Sexual orientation and gender identity are one of the newest ones that a lot of employers are adding, and even I believe the federal government has recently added that as of a couple of years ago. How are we doing? Any questions so far? I just jumped right into it this morning. How are we doing? Do we have any questions or any comments? I think I see a couple things in the chat maybe. Oh, there's a link to that. Okay, great. So we will keep going. Okay, so the recruitment process. So we kind of talked about there's several steps that we're going to go through before we even have someone that sits in that chair across from us, or this day and age interviewing probably on Zoom across from us, right? Before we even bring that person in to interview. So we want to make sure that we are fully prepared. That way, that person that we decide to start with or persons to interview, that we have good confidence at the very least that they meet the minimum expectations that we're looking for to most likely get the best candidate and fit for the position. So step one, we have our job descriptions. Now, one of the common questions I get are job descriptions mandatory? Are they, is there a law that says we have to have certain things? And I will tell you, in relation to documentation and things that you have to have, it's very actually slim of things that the law actually requires. Do you have to have a job application? Again, unless you have like some type of federal contract, technically not really. You don't really have to have a job application. You don't have to have job descriptions. You don't have to have employment handbooks. You don't have to have certain policies. You don't have to offer vacation and other things. But then, if you do have these things, these are the things that you want to remember. These are the things that you want to have. And then there's a certain retention and record keeping components that do add on to that once you do have things for employee files. But outside of the I-9 and having certain payroll forms, everything else is optional. Now, optional and being best practice and something that you should do for your business are two different things. So, for example, starting with job descriptions. Job descriptions are important and kind of one of the basic things that a company would want to have. Your job description talks through, you want to have essential functions in there that you list. You want to have information on your exempt and non-exempt status. It's going to help you for your job postings. It's going to help you make sure that you interview the right candidates, because it's hard to interview the right candidates if you're not, kind of readily aware of what are the job requirements and things and duties that that person needs to do. And it also helps with accommodations, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in regards to accommodations for disability. It'll help with reporting structures. When you have a couple different jobs together, you kind of see what makes sense in regards to what department or division they should belong under, who they should report to. And then it also can help with the performance management and holding someone accountable. And I'll tell you, for companies that have tried not to have job descriptions or don't have them in place yet and have issues with issues with employee, it's kind of hard to sit with someone and say, hey, you're not meeting the expectations of your job. And first thing they're going to say, their line of defense is going to be, well, what is my job? And no one's ever told me, and that's not part of my job. So when something's written down, documented, it leaves a little room for kind of wiggle room for that. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit regarding accommodations. So essential functions are the functions that you need that make up the job pretty much. These are the functions that we say, if we start removing these from the position, then the position cease to exist. So essential functions are going to include, does the position exist to perform that function? Are there any other employees available who can perform that function? Or does it have to be distributed out? Is it limited of if we remove this function or functions from the job, how would that work? We also take a look at the degree of expertise or skill required to perform the function. So I say this in regards to when you have someone that comes in that has certain type of disabilities that says, I can't do this part of the position. Are we able to accommodate that? Is it going to be what's called a reasonable accommodation based off the functions? So when we say essential functions, those are the basic job duties that an employee must be able to perform with or without reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation could simply be if we have someone that has a hearing issue, let's say a receptionist, and they say, you know what, I wear a hearing aid, I can answer the phone, so that I need this attachment on the phone to help me hear better to amplify the sound. Well, a receptionist answering the phone would be essential function. If we remove that part of the position, they may come in, they may run copies for the office, they may set the office up and greet customers when they come in. But if they say, well, I can do that, I just can't answer the phone, well, that's a pretty major part of the job. So, but we may be able to reasonably accommodate them with that phone attachment that I had mentioned. And so that would be a way of a simple type of reasonable accommodation to help them perform that essential function. So essential functions are used to help employers determine the reason the job exists, because then if we start removing things that someone can't do, then it's like, well, wait a minute, that's another kind of cue that these might be essential. And it helps us determine when someone needs accommodation. So examples of essential functions are going to be day-to-day regular duties, management of a process or people, and systems or tools that are used. Again, going back to that receptionist phone example. So here's a sample job description. So we're taking a look here. We have a shipping supervisor. And in the job description, we have the summary of the job, which is great, gives a quick overview of what this position does. And then we have the duties and responsibilities. So some of these, we have notated. The ones that are notated are pretty essential to the position. So one of them receives and examines incoming shipments as well as execute shipments as required. So if I'm a shipping supervisor, I remove that I can't examine the shipments or something for whatever reason. It's going to make it a little tricky to do that part of the position. Now, let's say for whatever reason, let's say someone had eye surgery, so their seeing is a little bit off and they can't examine shipments. Now, could that temporarily be assigned to someone else? Maybe a shipping lead temporarily. That is something that's an option if they can do the other parts of their position. Maybe there's some part that we reasonably accommodate. Reasonable accommodation doesn't necessarily mean long-term. It doesn't mean that now this is the new part of their job. This just means that this is what we're doing right now. And if temporarily they need that, that's deemed as being reasonable. Maybe it's for a week or two, their eye heals and they can go back to doing all the functions of their job. So, that's something that we take a look at. Manages and processes the freight claims efficiently for customer orders, maintains all files and records keeping. But now let's say there's a couple different parts of the job they can't do. They can't do number 2, they can't do 3, 4. And as we start pulling things out of the job, then it's kind of like, well, wow, can you do this job at all? Now, another type of reasonable accommodation can be time off of work. And actually under the law, that's really one of the easiest and quickest ways to do reasonable accommodation. And a lot of times employers don't like to put someone off of work, but that's usually deemed one of the easiest ones to do, even if it causes what we consider a hardship, right? Because we're missing that employee there at the workplace. But that's one of the easiest ones to do. Doesn't mean, again, it's long term. That could be based off of, let's say, doctor's note to doctor's note, because it could be temporary, or it could be a short-term situation. It could be every month we look at it and see if we can continue to accommodate that time, or it's something ongoing. And the kind of the time off of things like that, we get more into that. I think that's a, kind of later in our sessions when we go through leave of absences. That's one of the major ones we talk about. But this also covers being on the job as well, because someone may need accommodations short-term and long-term, or daily while they're still actively working. The next part of the job description I want to point out, just to kind of show the different parts of the job description that you'll want to have. Also, that helps with accommodations and someone being able to do the position, or taking a look and adding in the work environment. If you have a, excuse me, a work environment that's a little bit out of the norm, and even just, is part of the norm, we want to make sure that we put that in there. For example, one of my clients is a casino, and so the casino it's a smoke casino. So that's something that we make sure to put in there, so that people know that they may be working in a smoky environment. This may not be everyone that's interested in doing that or can work in that type of environment. So we want to let them know if there's someone working in an outside or in a warehouse where they can have extreme heat or extreme cold or extreme weather conditions, working out in the elements. Those are some of the things that you'll want to put down. Physical demands. This is another very important part of a job description. Physical demands you're going to be put in there regarding, if someone needs to frequently lift or move, for this example, 40 pounds, they're required to use their hands and talk or hear. The employee is frequently required to stand, walk, reach with hands and arms, stooping, sitting. Let's say someone's required to sit and be sedentary most of the time. That could be something. So all of these things, again, it doesn't have to always be in such a detail, right? But a good idea so that people can see immediately, how that's going to work. Another simple thing, I used to do safety in HR for a bank. And bank tellers, 9 times out of 10, a lot of times, what are they doing? They're standing. Nowadays, you see more of them with a stool and things to sit down, but a type of reasonable accommodation are to get anti-fatigue mats. And that helps them to support their back and their knees and their feet while they're doing their job, to make sure they're assisting with that. Now, it's not to say that they even have any type of condition, but it's also preventative as well. And that's something that we may get to help with that if they do already have existing conditions. Back in my time when we were doing, when we had tellers, we really didn't want people sitting, but as a reasonable accommodation for someone that may have issues standing, then at that time we may use a stool or something to help accommodate. So it could be as simple as that, as a way to do accommodations for someone. All right, we get into the next part. We have exempt versus non-exempt, or we always call, of course, more commonly known as hourly or salaried. And pretty much exempt versus non-exempt. Exempt means I am exempt from overtime laws. I'm exempt for those, where if I'm non-exempt or hourly, I am not exempt from overtime laws, meal and break requirements, things like that. To qualify for an exemption under the federal law, these are called 541 exemptions, aka also known as white collar exemptions. There's a couple different things to be considered. They're called white collar exemptions because this is for non-manual labor work. So someone cannot, let's say, be in construction, for example, in certain levels. Now, if I work in construction and I'm a buyer and I buy the materials, that's a little bit different. But if I'm a foreman and I'm out there, a lot of times they're going to be non-exempt hourly because they're also part of doing some manual labor, manual work out there. So that's why they're called white collar exemptions. And we have the salaries test and the duties test. So to qualify for exemption, there are 3 tests that the department has long held that must be met for exemption to apply. An employee must be paid on a salary basis, and he or she must at least earn a certain minimum amount. So we talk about minimum amounts for hourly employees, but there's also a minimum amount for salaried employees. And it's not that when someone's considered to be exempt that they meet one part of these tests. It's kind of an all or nothing. So after the next couple slides, we'll start going over the duties test, which is going to be the meat of it. But if someone can meet the duties test, but if they don't meet that minimum salary requirement, then that can automatically knock them out of being eligible to be considered exempt. So up until December of last year, and for many, many, many years, the federal rate for exemption was $4.55 a week. So when we take a look at that, if we have a manager that we're paying and they're $4.55 a week, that's not very much money. And so there was a lot of discussion on whether that was a living wage. So that's only $23,666, $60 a year. I don't know what parts of the country that really someone could live on that. And that means that they're not getting overtime or anything. This is their straight salary divided into whatever pay periods throughout the year. So that's very low. So the federal government, after years and years of discussion, as they were going through what they call living wages, they said, we need to increase that. So effective January 1st of this year, they did increase it to $684 a week. That's still not very much. It brings it up to $35,568. It's a little bit better. Different parts of the country, of course, it's going to be more beneficial than others. But like I said, there's many states that will also have a higher minimum salary for their exemption employees as well, the same that they do their hourly employees. Illinois defaults to the federal. So just to kind of let you know about that one. So in addition, exempt employees must perform certain executive, administrative, or professional job duties set forth in the regulation that we'll be going through. So there's certain different classifications of exemptions. Again, if they don't fall into any of these exemptions based off of what they do, then again, that's going to automatically default them to non-exempt. So it's always safer if someone's on the border to put them as a non-exempt employee than to misclassify them as an exempt employee. The idea behind that is that there's more benefits being non-exempt or hourly than there are being an exempt salaried employee. Okay, as a non-exempt employee, you're eligible for overtime, you're eligible for mandatory, meal periods and different things, whereas exempt employees, a lot of times we can get worked to death. So that's how that works and the difference. There's also kind of subcategory. There's a couple of them where the salary test is a little bit different, either maybe higher or it may be limited or no salary. And we'll talk about that one towards the end of our groupings. But one of them are going to be your highly compensated employee. Those are employees that perform office or non-manual work, and they're paid an annual compensation of $107,432 or more a year. So they don't have the regular 684 weeks. These are highly compensated. And if they are customarily and regularly perform at least one of the duties as we go through the different sections of exemptions, if they do one of those, then they're considered exempt. A lot of times these are going to be your executive level. So someone that's a department head or something like that. So those are where those kind of fall into. The federal exemptions are going to be your executive, administrative, professional. Under that comes medical, and then computer, and then we have our outside sales employees. White collar exemptions, the executive exemption. This is a person whose primary duty is management of an enterprise or a customarily recognized department or subdivision. Now, I'll tell you, as we kind of come from and working through still parts of our job description, because this, what we do in the job description will help us kind of clarify and look through and see, do people meet these exemption duties in here as we go through them. But titles are important, but they're not the end all be all. So typically if someone has a title, director of accounting, financial, CFO, chief of financial operations, CIO, VP, things like that, those are kind of be a hint whether someone is an executive level. Now, based off of their duties, because I have seen some pretty accelerated titles out there, but based off their duties will support that. But that's kind of a first kind of start of indication as to whether someone may fall under certain exemptions. So this person's an executive. So let's say they're a director of finance and they oversee the finance and accounting departments, right? They customarily and regularly direct the work of 2 or more employees, and these are usually employees that are full-time or full-time equivalent. So let's say it's 4 employees that are part-time working 20 hours a week, but 40 hours a week is full-time. So those together kind of meet the 2 or more employees. They have the authority to hire or fire, or recommendations as to hiring or firing, have a particular weight, so even if they're not always directly doing it, if they have control over someone's employment, whether they're directly making the decision or someone asks for their advice and they tell them, no, this person needs to be let go, or yes, we need to hire them, or yes, I approve that promotion, or they need to be given that, or something like that. If it carries particular weight, then that's something that qualifies. Okay, this might be someone who's an executive level and could fall under this exemption and therefore be able to be paid a salary and be exempt. Okay, another type of executive employee is someone who's an owner. So if they own at least a bona fide 20% equity interest in the enterprise of which they're employed, and they're engaged in management of that, the salary level and salary base test do not apply in this situation. So we talked about a few situations where they don't. This would be one if I'm an owner of something. So this doesn't necessarily have any, because there's different type of ownership. You may have owners that are kind of more silent behind the scenes, and maybe they're more on, the operations of the business in regards to how it functions and, and things like that, but not there for the day-to-day managing and overseeing of employees. That could be considered actively engaged in management of the enterprise. So, but they have that 20%, maybe more ownership. So that's another way that they could be exempt under this exemption. We have the administrative exemption, and this is where a lot of employees tend to fall as well. Your administrative, again, office or non-manual work directly related to the management or general business operations of that employer or the customers. They exercise discretion and independent judgment, again, under matters of significance. You're going to see that a lot in regards to exemptions. And then they also take a look at not only, being able to have their judgment and discretion on these matters, but how often they do it. If I only do it once here and there, then that does not make me a management level employee or what have you, or exempt. But if these are things I'm actively doing about 50% of the time, then likely I'm going to be exempt based off of this part of it. So it includes activities such as analysis making, determination, setting prices, assessing risks, committing company resources, negotiating similar tasks, sometimes having the ability to be able to sign into contracts, negotiate contracts. Those are all going to be anything that has like a financial impact against the business is a great way to test, is that a matter of significance. Just because it's important to me and near and dear to my heart doesn't necessarily make it just, matters of significance, but more in regards to its impact on the business. So management or general business operations are going to include, things that have to deal with taxes, finance, budgeting, accounting, auditing, quality control, purchasing, HR, labor relations, benefits, computer networking, database administration, all of these that help the business to run. Then we go into the professional exemption. So that's performance of work requiring advanced knowledge in a field or science or learning customarily acquired by a prolonged course of specialized instruction. I know that sounds a bit fancy. We'll kind of describe that a little bit more in a minute. That's also performance of work requiring invention, imagination, originality, or talent, or recognized artistic or creative field. So the professional exemption is pretty much, as it says, it's your profession. This is what you do. You've gone to school for it. You've got license for it. You use your creativity for it. There's a couple different portions. So we have the creative professional as part of this. So this is where their main part of work is based off of invention, imagination, originality, or talent, in a field that's artistic or creative endeavor. These are going to be your graphic artists, your actors, your painters, your writers, cartoonists, musicians, authors. So these are all types of creative professionals. When we take a look at the field of science or learning, that learned professional exemption is going to be someone that's done specialized academic training. Examples to this are going to be your doctors, attorneys, teachers, Accounting is licensed accounting. One of the misconceptions of accountings, or I've seen clients that say, oh, this is our person that's the accountant for the company. And they're pretty much a glorified bookkeeper. So, accountings, again, they have either their licensed CPA, they have their master's degree in it or something. Those are going to be your internal kind of accounting professionals that could be considered exempt. Engineers, chemical or biological sciences. So those are examples of professional exemptions. Another type of kind of sub portion of that in your professional exemption are going to be your computer. It's another portion, computer and IT. Your computer and IT are going to be someone who is higher level. This is someone that's dealing with creating a system or software. This is someone that analyzes the techniques and procedures to be able to go through a higher level, right? Creating code writings and all that fanciness in regards to that. Design, development, documentation, analysis, creation, and testing, modification of computer systems. This is another one I often see misclassified, where they're like, oh, they're the IT department, so they're all classified. They're all classified as exempt. And I'm thinking, okay, so the IT person that came and connected my printer and got me onto the system and network, they're exempt, and yeah, that may be hard for some of us, right, who are computer challenged and not being able to really know how to do all those maybe fancy connections that we think. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's not that specialized to be considered exempt. Okay, you're also taking a look at the design, documentation, testing, or creation of system, or a combination of duties or things thereof. Okay, so we want to make sure this person is definitely a higher level computer person. This isn't just someone that just, it's not necessarily someone that's going to be the geek squad. It's going to be higher level. So someone that does, manufacture, repair of computer hardware, again, that may be hard for a lot of us, but this does not fall under something that would be considered exempt. Employees who are highly dependent upon the use of computers and software programs, engineers, drafters, and things like that. Again, unless they're using it maybe to make original things or something, but just within that itself is not considered something that would be exempt. So employees who are not primarily engaged in computer systems and analysis and programming or other similarly skilled computer-related occupations, do not qualify as exempt under the FLSA. So how are we doing this morning? I know I just started right into it. Do we have any questions in the chat room?
And although I didn't say it, if you have a question, you can type it in the Q&A box, and so if you think of something while she's talking, you can type it there, and then when we get to the breaks, we'll be able to pull those up. So even if you think of something later, you can type it in the Q&A.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, we will keep rolling along here. The next exemption that we're going to talk about is the outside sales exemption. So here again is another one where we have a little bit more flexibility, right, in regards to the pay, where we don't have to stick to the $684 a week. The outside sales exemption, and I'll tell you, this one is commonly kind of misused, and different states have different regulations on it, but sometimes it's a little bit more loosely used to the benefit of the employer. But we want to be careful with this one, because it's so flexible that we have to be careful that we don't get ourselves in trouble. So your outside sales person, this is your person. So I always get asked, well, their sales position, and I expect them outside selling, do I have to pay them a base salary? You don't. Now, to be competitive, and if you want that person to, really kind of work hard, you want to, hopefully try to have some type of base, and but you can always make it either commission only, or make commission the majority of their salary that they get, of their wages. So this is someone that's primarily making sales or obtaining orders or contracts for services for the use of facilities paid by the customer, and customarily regularly doing work away from the employer's place of business. So that's the biggest part of that. If they're inside and they're on the phone and things like that, there's a little different kind of version that we'll talk about next. But this is someone that's in the field. I want to say going door to door. We don't do business like that as much anymore. But they're out there meeting with clients, setting up things, setting up proposals, going out there and doing that. So when they're doing that, there are no salary basis or salary level tests for outside sales in regards to that. And again, they're doing that the majority time. You know, that's 50% or more of their position. The next portion regarding to sales are going to be your inside sales, retail establishments. So this gets a little bit tricky. I've come across companies that want to treat inside sales the same way that they do outside sales. And it's not to say that you can't pay your inside salespersons a salaried, but there's a little bit more requirements in regards to that. So the employee exempt is exempt from overtime pay if the employee is employed by a retail or service establishment where more than half of the employee's total earnings and representative period or pay period are commissions on goods and services, and total compensation divided by number of hours worked or regular wage exceeds 1.5 times the minimum wage. So this is all put in to say, you know, and if the conditions are not met, exemption does not apply. So it's saying, okay, so you can have an inside salesperson, let's say, you know, they're selling furniture or something like that, right? They have the sales folks, they walk around the floor with you and they're showing you stuff. A lot of times they have a commission that's tied to that. You know, there's a car salesperson. So these are things that, okay, we can do commission, but we want to make sure that they're getting something out of this, right? That if they're selling that service or that product, that they're at least making a certain weight. If they're not making that per pay period or look back period, then they at least need to be paid a certain amount of minimum kind of salary. Okay, so theirs is a little bit different in it. So it's not that you can't, but it's got to meet some requirements. And then you want to make sure that that retail establishment is truly a retail establishment. So that means that it's a retail or service establishment that's at least 75% of its annual dollar volume comes from the sale of goods or services or both. These are things that's not for resale, and these are things that are recognized as retail sales or services in a particular industry. Okay, so we want to make sure that those conditions are met. If not, so it's kind of twofold. It's the establishment has to qualify, and the duties again have to qualify for that. So why do we want to make sure that we get this right? What is the importance of it? You know, if we get it wrong, oh, well, my bad, so sorry, you know, I'll fix it next time or something like that. It's not so simple. The misclassification of someone as exempt versus non-exempt is one of the most expensive mistakes a company can make. The problem with that is a lot of times when the law takes a look at and enforcement take a look at something that has been misclassified or, you know, a break in the law, right? They look at frequency, especially when they're attaching penalties. They look at frequency and they're looking at the amount. So picture this, if we have a group of employees that we do this every day. So this was several years ago now, but there was a big hit in the insurance industry in regards to claim adjusters. Claim adjusters, they don't typically go out. They sit at a desk. You know, you call, for example, you call and you report, hey, I got in a car accident. They take your information. They take statements over the phone. They're processing claims. They're very professional about it, of course, and everything. But unfortunately, there were many insurance companies that had them misclassified as exempt salaried employees. So when they did these different tests and found that, wait a minute, these employees should be non-exempt. They don't meet any of these white-collar exemptions. So guess what? All of those employees, every day, every time they worked, that was a violation of the law. Each situation, each person is a penalty. The longer it happens, that penalty just adds up and adds up and adds up and gets to be very expensive. So that's why, you know, these issues, because a lot of times when you misclassify one person in a position, that whole group of people are misclassified, and that's when it gets expensive. And then you have what's called a class action lawsuit, and then it really gets crazy. So that's why it's so important. So some of the issues that that we take a look at is white collar exemptions, the misapplication of exemption or improper assumption that all salaried employees are exempt. You know, we usually, in HR, we try to refer to, instead of saying salary or hourly, we try to say exempt, non-exempt. And here's the reason why. You can have someone that's salaried, non-exempt, which means that they have a set salary, let's say $40,000 a year. And, they're non-exempt because they're eligible for overtime and other parts of it. So I know it seems crazy, right? Then people say, well, what's the point? If technically they're still non-exempt anyway, why not just pay them, based on the hour? Technically they are based on the hour. Now, if they're working the same 9 to 5 schedule each time they work, then their salary is going to be the same. So in a sense, you can say that they're salary non-exempt. But if at any time they do work overtime, work over those 40 hours a week, then they're eligible for overtime. So I hope that I hope that helps, just enough to be confusing, right? So you can have someone that's salary non-exempt, and that helps again if you have professional positions. If you have someone with, let's say, a management title that you want to kind of give some weight, but they don't necessarily have all the management duties to qualify for the exemption, or it's a professional environment and you don't want your, let's say, office manager, but not technically, manager in relation to their duties, but you want to have, hey, we're going to pay you $40,000 a year. Technically, they can still be non-exempt, but it just sounds better for them as an employee to have that salary. It's very interesting, the mindset of employees, right? They feel like, I'm salaried, I've made it. I always tell the funny joke of my younger cousin. He's like, when I grow up, I want to, and he says, I think he's changing a little bit today, and he's in his early 30s, but bless his heart, he would say, I want to be a manager. I want to work in a job where I wear a suit and tie to work, because that would, and be paid salary. That was making it, right? And a lot of employees still feel that way. And so to kind of help them with that mentality of their level of importance in the company, you attach a salary to it, even though behind the scenes, we treat them like an hourly employee for compliance reasons. We have deductions. If someone's misclassified, there's improper deductions and an overtime. So they're not getting their overtime. So therefore it's a type of, we're deducting from their earning potential. So that's an error that can come with misclassification. Improper treatment of employee as an independent contractor. So we'll talk a little bit about that as another part of misclassification. Hours worked, failure to record a payout record of hours worked. There's more requirements in record keeping for someone who is a non-exempt hourly employee because they're paid for the time that they work. When someone's exempt, we're not getting all of that. So chances are we're missing out on their pay, and then there's going to be a penalty attached to that for not paying them everything. And then, sometimes there can be a little bit of confusion between state and federal law, but we want to make sure that we're going to follow the laws that are going to be most beneficial to the employee. And as soon as someone, and it happens quite often, right? Someone gets into business, they're not familiar with all these fancy laws, right? And the exemptions. And, I always tell people, as soon as you realize someone is misclassified, change them immediately. Unfortunately, it doesn't fix what's been done in the past, but you can fix what's moving forward. And hopefully that helps if there's ever come to the penalty phase of it. But just to kind of let you know some of the penalties that could come with it, some companies think, oh, once I fix it, I'm done and I'm good. There's actually a 2-year statute of limitations that applies. So if someone were to file, a wage and hour, claim or something like that, even if it's fixed, they can go back 2 years. And if they find that it's willful, that it's done on purpose, then they can actually go back 3-year statute. If a voluntary agreement is not, made, then there could also be other suits that are done in private lawsuits outside of just with that, with like the DOL or the local, your Department of Labor for Illinois. And then when that happens, it gets larger, right? We talked about the class action. They have to go back and do maybe back pay and court fees and things like that. It can get very, very expensive. The next major misclassification that we want to, and probably the most expensive misclassification, is employee versus independent contractor. And I tell you, this comes up nonstop with companies because, you know, it's very expensive to have an employee. There's a lot of risks that employers take to have it. There's a lot of, you know, insurances and things involved, taxes and things. So it's very easy just to say, you know what, I'd like to pay someone as a 1099, especially while someone's starting out, right? We want to keep our business costs low and controllable. That's one of the easiest ways to do that. Just because, unfortunately, you know, in employment law, just because it's the easy and convenient way for us as the employers doesn't always mean that it's the legal way. So we want to make sure we protect ourselves. Proper classification of a worker is important for a company to reduce risk and liabilities. Misclassification of an employee as an independent contractor can be a costly mistake, and we'll talk about that. Sure, you'll have the temporary savings on workers' comp, payroll taxes. We won't have to offer them health and retirement benefits, so which means if we're not paying the employer portion for those. We don't have to pay into Social Security and Medicare and things like that. But when we don't do that, those are other type of benefits of being an employee that someone gets. Sometimes there's unemployment could be a factor of that. States sometimes have disability laws and things like that that are paid into when they're employees. And when they're not getting that, all of that stuff is not done. And, you know, here's where Mr. IRS gets involved, right? When we're not doing that, they're not getting the tax revenue from that, from you, the employer, or from the employee. And they do not like that. So what can happen is if they find that this misclassification was done, they want to go back and they want to recoup those funds. And then they're going to add penalties. So that can be very expensive. So what are the deciding factors? What are we taking a look at when we are taking a look at, you know, is someone classify? And again, this is another area where it's an all or nothing deal. It's not, well, they have the majority of these things. It's either a yes answer for everything. If there's anything that's a no or a maybe, then it's always best, again, to err on the side of putting them an employee. It's always better to err on what's going to be more beneficial for them than not, because that's going to reduce your liability. So we have a few deciding factors. They call it kind of the ABCs. We have behavioral control, and that's is a worker and employee when the business has the right to direct and control the work performed by the worker, even if the right's not always exercised. Okay, so even if you say, you know what, we don't micromanage people, they know what they're here to do, but if they have the ability to ever step in and have that kind of right, then that's part of the behavior. So types of behavior control are going to be the type of instructions that they're getting, such as when and where to work, what tools are to be used, where to purchase the supplies or services, receiving the type of services and instructions and things like that. Do they have to go through internal trainings for that? These are all things that are part of the deciding factor. The degree of instruction. You know, more detailed instructions may indicate that the worker is an employee. Less details reflect less control. So you want to take a look at the detail of instructions given. Evaluation systems to measure how the work is being done. You know, if you want to do performance management with them and things like that, if I have an independent contractor, I'm paying them for their expertise. You come in and you do the job or you don't. If I want to control and sit and, okay, let me evaluate how you're fixing this or how you're doing that, then that could, you know, cross the lines of employer-employee situation. And then training someone how to do the job. If I'm going to train you, again, because I want that control, right? So I'm going to train you how I want you to do it, how I prefer. Again, that's behavior. I'm controlling your behavior. That's a strong evidence that you're going to be, sounds like more of an employee than an independent contractor. Typically, an independent contractor, they're experts in their field. They're going to come in, they're going to know what they're doing. They don't need you to train them. They need you to point and say, hey, here's the project at hand. Here's the assignment. This is our agreement on it. This is what the outcome I want us to be. And that's what they're focused on. They're more focused on the outcome versus on how to get to that outcome and how frequent, things like that. The next deciding factor is going to be financial control. This is a big one of it. Does the business have the right to direct or control the financial and business aspects of the worker's job? Another thing, and who's got the financial risk of it? If I'm an independent contractor, I'm, in a sense, my business, whether I'm a solopreneur, or I have a whole kind of company behind me and other contractors with me, right? I take on that financial control. Significant investment in the equipment the worker uses in working for someone else. If I come in and I'm at your facilities, I'm using your office space, I'm using your computer, your cell phone and resources and things like that. Chances are, unless I'm being charged a fee for that, I'm paying to use that and I'm renting it from you, that could be a little different. But if that's something the company is paying for and supplying, then again, that looks like that's their finances that are tied up in it, not mine. So that's looking a little bit more like an employee. Unreimbursed expenses, independent contractors are more likely to incur than employees, because I'm an employee, I'm going to submit a receipt, I'm going to get paid. I don't have the financial burden of my position like an independent contractor. An independent contractor, it's at my cost. I'm going to submit, I'm going to put that in my quote. If I know I'm going to have certain expenses, whether it's Wi-Fi, computer materials, whatever it is, that's all part of my pricing. So, and that's what the company or client is going to pay. Opportunity for profit or loss. If I have the financial risk, who's assuming the risk? Again, if I'm an independent contractor, it's my company. I'm the one that's assuming the risk if I don't do the job correctly or something like that. Or I don't price it enough, I have to do more hours than what I've quoted for, that's going to be independent contractor. But if the company is mostly assuming the risk, that's looking more like an employee. Are my services available to the market, or are you my only one? I've definitely gone into clients and seen, for example, the bookkeeper, right? Oh, she's an independent contractor. They just come in twice a week and do our books. And it's like, okay, so here she comes in, they're in your office space using your, tools. You require her here to, you require him or her to be here twice a week. You're their only client. They're not advertising anywhere. They don't have any cards made. They can sometimes even be using the company email. And that's like, okay, so explain to me, how are they independent contractors? So, those are some of the things, because the frequency of how often someone comes to work or how many hours doesn't matter. It's those 2 hours a week or 12 hours a week or 40 hours a week. If these situations don't exist, then they're a default to an employee. What is the method of payment? An employee is going to be generally guaranteed a regular wage amount for hourly or weekly or other period of time, even when supplemented by commission, because there should be a commission agreement. If it's an independent contractor, a lot of times it's a flat fee, and it's negotiated on when those fees come, whether at certain points in the job or project, at the completion of it or something. So those are all things that we're taking a look at. Okay. And the ABC is kind of the C of it, the relationship. The type of relationship depends upon how the worker and the business perceive their interaction with each other. Those are going to include, is there a written contract that describes the relationship the parties intend to create? So a contract stating the worker is an employee or independent contractor is not necessarily sufficient. Just because we put it in writing always doesn't make it so. So we want to make sure not only is it in writing, but the work relationship also supports that, whether there's a contract in place or not. But it helps to have a written contract, because, if you have someone coming in, if I hire someone that's going to be a plumber, there's some type of agreement that we're going to have, not always maybe in the form of a contract, but they have some kind of rules and guidelines about how they're going to do the job that I have to agree to accept it. So, it could be verbal or written, but there's an understanding behind it. If it's an employee, if you're going through the job duties and stuff with me and kind of setting expectations, it's a little bit more, more of a job offer and not a contract necessarily. So we want to take a look at how the relationship is even established. In regards to benefits, business providing employee type benefits such as insurance, a pension plan, vacation, and things like that, those benefits don't go to your independent contractors, because again, that's all part of how they put that in their own kind of financial gain, right? If I'm an independent contractor, I establish when or if I want to give myself vacation. I may build the cost of that time into my quotes and things like that, but the company is not paying that separately. The permanency of the relationship is important. Expectation, if I have a contract, there's a start and there's an end to the job if I'm an independent contractor. Now, it could be situational. If I'm an IT independent contractor, right? Anytime a company needs a system upgrade or servicing, I may contract with that person to come in and do that. They bring in their own materials to do that, and they connect all the little doohickeys, right? I told you I'm not financially inclined, right? So we have the doohickey to the computer, they upgrade them, they service them, they may suggest swapping them out. But this, this IT, maybe a contractor has many other clients they do this for. Let's say I can call them if my computers go down and I have issues, they come in and service them. So it's either specific time or project, specified or situational. So it's not going to be kind of necessarily ongoing every day coming in or something like that. Services provided, which are a key activity of the business, the extent to which the services performed by the worker are seen as a key aspect of the regular business. If this is something that's needed day in and day out for the regular just running the business, then chances are this may be an employee as well. Again, the independent contractor is going to be as needed. It's not necessarily going to be all the time to make the business run. So kind of just a quick kind of cheat sheet at this. An employee is going to be someone that has a continuing relationship with an employer. An independent contractor may have that, but it's done for multiple people. So they're not able to have the time to be able to be there, full time. An employee is furnished with the tools or materials necessary for the position. That could be a cell phone, that could be a laptop, that could be an office, that could be, physical actual tools, hammer, drills, things like that. An independent contractor, they're going to hire their own tools and equipment. They're going to hire their own, assistants and maybe subcontractors to do a job. An employee can quit at any time. Most states have a type of at-will kind of doctrine where they can just quit. There's no tie to the business. Where an independent contractor, there's some type of contract discussed, so they can make a profit or suffer a loss, if they decide to quit. If I don't, and they can be sued, right? Because I've been paid to do a certain job. So if I don't fulfill that and I just say, hey, I'm not coming back, I'm not going to complete this, there's legal ramifications. An employee must comply with instructions on when, where, and how to come to work. This is your schedule. This is what you should be doing. And, again, this isn't the standalone, right, where the independent contractor cannot necessarily have some of those expectations, but typically they're going to set around their own hours or that's negotiated upon. Employee is trained by the employer. I'm training you how I want you to do your work while you're here. An independent contractor, you're not going to have that. They'll also sometimes have their own business license. So again, these are some of the differences between the two to kind of help determine, okay, what type of relationship and behavior and stuff like that do we really have? Do we have a question out there?
I believe we do. Oh, Bruce was just asking if the slide deck can be shared. So did I share the slide? Did we share the slide deck before? I can't remember, Desiree, if we did or not. I know I shared the video.
Yeah, I don't think so. I can put it in a PDF kind of notes format.
Okay.
We can kind of figure out something around that.
Yes, so we'll figure out something around the deck, and then the video will definitely be shared as well. So we'll have the video uploaded some point in the next 24 hours.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so again, why are these important, right? We want to make sure, because I always want to make sure I inform you of, and as a HR consultant myself, I go into different businesses and things, and I always tell people, I always tell employers, I'm not the one assuming the financial risk. My job is to tell you the proper way to do it and help you get that set up. If you choose not to do that, okay, that's fine. As a company, you take your risk, right? You gamble a little bit. And I've had companies that say, you know what, I just can't afford to bring people on as employees right now, and so I have them as 1099. I say, no problem, but I want to let you know what you're risking, right? It's kind of like, okay, I can't make you drive the speed limit, but if you get caught speeding, this is what you're aware of, and are you willing to assume the risk? Some people are, so we speed, right? Because we're gambling that we're not going to get caught or pulled over. So, so some of the risks are company will be required to pay back the federal taxes for the employee and the employer that were not paid. So here's the thing also, I come across companies where they say, well, this person requested to be a 1099. This person, signed a contract that said that they're okay with being 1099 and they'll accept any, and resume any responsibilities if anything comes up. None of that carries any weight in court because the burden is on the employer. It's kind of like the parent, right? Minors have no, rights. A minor can't waive their right, and the same as an employee. They cannot waive their rights. So, you may say, or if they say, oh, you don't have to pay me overtime. Don't worry about it. I want to help you out. I don't need to be paid all that. I don't have anything to do anyway. None of those they can waive. It's like, oh, that's sweet of you. That's nice. But legally, I have to pay you because guess what? Who takes the hit? You, the company. So, misclassification as an independent contractor and employee is the most expensive mistake a company can make. And why is because essentially you are violating just about every rule, right? You're not paying the right minimum wages most of the time. You're not paying for overtime. They don't have workers' comp. They're not eligible for unemployment. All of these things that are being violated because we're not treating them as an employee. Required meals that they're not getting that. So every time that employee works is a violation and a penalty attached to that. And if you multiply that by many employees, you see where I'm going with this, very expensive. So I always say that's my disclaimer I put down with what the consequences are, and it's the risk is up to the company. But the employer's liability of the FICA taxes would be 20% plus the entire amount owed by the employer and the employee, the penalties that come with that. Also, the employer has no rights to recover from the employee. So when someone gets dinged with this, they can't say, okay, employee, I have to make you an independent contractor, I have to make you an employee, but you know what? I didn't realize that, we weren't paying the taxes for you and you weren't paying your taxes. So I've had to pay them. So I need to come back and I'm going to deduct them from you. No, because the burden's on you, that the company should have done it. You assume the hit. You cannot go back to the employee and recoup that. The employer liability for unemployment taxes, and also, again, the IRS, they like their money, and when you don't give them their money, they get very upset. And they assess all types of fees and stuff like that because they want to make a point. They want employers to get it, not to do this. So they're going to attach, and those are federal. A lot of times the state will also have their own enforcements as well. Okay, now that we've ended on that gloom and doom fun note, right? So that's the end of that portion. So those are all the things that as we're getting to closer and closer that we want to think about as we get into, actually, again, I told you there's all these things that we're considering and think about before that person even sits in front of us.
Desiree, can I just add like a point of, I guess, just to drive home the point further? In my preparation for hiring employees for this, I was having lots of conversation about how to classify my employees, but I'm a big researcher because I'm a person who should have been an attorney. And so, and to give you guys context, the person who I was having a conversation with, who is my bookkeeper, is also a retired IRS agent who happens to be my father. So he's like, yeah, you can just do this. Well, the accountant's view and an attorney's view are going to be two different things, because an accountant, and you see this happen a lot where people look at things and they're like, well, what do I have to do legally, and what do I have to do to comply with IRS? So always make sure that you adhere to the law, because in the research that I found a CPA who had actually, this is case law, a CPA who had been dinged by this because he didn't necessarily adhere to certain laws as it relates to tax related things with employees, and even with like your own salaries and stuff like that. So there's lots of different things that you have to take into consideration as you are starting your own business, and make sure that you do what's legal and not just what's the best thing for your pocket based on what an accountant might tell you.
Exactly. Thank you for adding that. Yes, because you may get different views, but at the end of the day, you're the company, you assume, so it's always better to be conservative and, just to make sure, because
nobody wants that 20% penalty.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like I said, they like their money, and you don't want them, once they start digging in one area, you don't want them to start digging in others and stuff like that. Nope, nope, nope. So, so even before someone sits, in your seat or on that Zoom time with you to interview, all these things that go into it. And again, I talked about from the beginning that there are things that you don't necessarily legally have to have in regards to employment, the job descriptions being one of them. But as we're working through the job descriptions and the duties, we're able to see the control of that position. We're able to see and talk about, well, physically what the job needs to do. So it helps us with reasonable accommodations and what we can, approve and accommodate versus what the company may not be able to or something. It's going to help us. We'll talk more in our next seminar, but it'll help us with performance management. It's going to help us with determining the work relationship, exempt, non-exempt. Because here's the other thing. If there is a challenge and someone claims, discrimination based on something, or they claim they should have been exempt or non-exempt, guess what's the first documentation they're going to ask for? Do you have a job description? If your answer is no, start talking about settlement figures. So, and it's just as real as that, because, your documentation, it's all about, not what you said or discussed, it's what you can prove. And, having these documentations is a company's way of proving things. All right, so moving on to recruiting and interviewing. So we start to get into the fun part of it. There's different ways. We're going to talk about recruiting. How do we get our candidates? Where do they come from? There's so many ways that we can get candidates that we interview. It could be word of mouth, where we have friends and family referrals. It could be through networking. And then there's some more kind of official ways to do it. We have staffing agencies and recruiters. So staffing agencies are good to use. They save on time, and hiring is one of the most time-consuming things. This is kind of like it's a necessary evil, I will tell you. I have a client right now that's hiring, and she's like, oh my gosh, I interviewed for 5 hours yesterday, and I got another 4 hours of interviewing, and that takes time, right? Who has time to run a business? Typically, if you're filling this position, and that duty needs to be done, so either you or someone else is having to do it, and then to take time away from that to interview, it's just it's not fun, but it's necessary. We need it to keep the workplace going and making sure that everything moves smoothly. So staffing agencies and recruiters come in perfect. They do the footwork for you. They'll, post the job, they'll interview for you, they'll help you with the hiring. Sometimes they'll even help you with training and onboarding, kind of the beginning steps. It's great. They do that for a fee though. So it can be done, but that's usually one of the more expensive ways to hire. They do all the heavy lifting for you, but it costs. So sometimes they'll charge like a percentage or of what they do, or a flat fee. If they're doing ongoing, kind of what's considered an RPO, where the recruitment process outsourcing is what that stands for. And you're commonly, constantly hiring large companies. Like I have a client that has drivers that she does deliveries on behalf of a major distribution company and warehousing. And so she's constantly turning over people. So she has a recruiting agency that, regular basis, they're holding job fairs and screening people and things for her. And that's great. And she pays a monthly fee of, $4,000 to $5,000, depending on the agreement of how many people that they'll interview a month for her. And that's an ongoing cost, but it saves a lot of time. So that's an option. Or it could be a flat fee. And a lot of times the flat fee is going to be a little pricey, and it depends on the level of a position. Usually if it's an hourly person, let's say, administrative assistant or office manager, those fees are going to maybe be 15 to 18% of the person's annual salary. So what does that look like? If I'm paying someone, let's say $20 an hour to be, let's say, an office manager, right? But, we've already talked about our exemptions. Chances are, as an office manager, we give them a fancy title, make them feel good, right? Nice and professional. But the duties may not qualify for that. So we give them $20 an hour annually. That looks like $41,600. So now we say, okay, 18% of that is the fee that's $7,400, almost $7,500 to hire that person. So it's a little rich. It hits our pocket pretty good. But now it could be worth it, because then the company, the staffing agencies usually have some type of replacement fee or guarantee, or they'll let you spread the payments out. They'll say, hey, $2,000 to get started. After 30 days that they're there, then you can pay another, $3,000. But then after they've been there for you 90 days and they pass the introductory period, then you pay the rest of the amount. And it's like, okay, and then that way that the person is going to work out. Or they may say, hey, if they don't work out in the first year, we'll replace them at no additional cost or something like that. So there's a guarantee. So anytime if you're thinking about doing that, make sure that you kind of look for those things in the contract and negotiate those things, because that's going to be very important. Because what you don't want to pay is keep paying these fees and have people keep turning over, and you're just paying these and they're not sticking. So you want to watch out for that. Now, when you're looking for someone that's higher salary, you're looking for a director level position. I've worked at companies where we looked to, to fill a VP of IT positions and something that's technical and hard to fill. Then, that's the times where you may say, you know what, we need some experts in this field. We're going to use an outside agency. When you do that, that can be 20 to 30% that you're paying. So let's say you're hiring a director of finance, and you're going to pay them $70,000 a year. The cost for them at minimally, if we're looking about 20% or so, could be $15,000, fee on top of what you're paying that person. So, you definitely want to make sure, then you want to make sure if they work out. So again, spreading out the payments, having some type of guarantee, you want to make sure if you're thinking that that's the route that you want to go to help you fill a position. Okay. So then if you decide, you know what, this might be too rich for my blood right now, I'm just starting out business, I'm going to do my own recruiting. So sounds good. That's what a lot of companies do. Then you're looking at different sites to post on. So you want to take a look at the level of position you're wanting to do, because that'll make a difference in regards to the type of places you post. For your hourly positions, you don't want to spend too much. Indeed or Craigslist actually are fine. Craigslist, it used to be $25. I believe they increased on us. I want to say they may be 30 or 40 for job posting. But if you're looking for entry-level position, it's not bad. A lot of people do go in there to look for jobs. It does depend on the area, though. I will tell you, I've used them, as we talked about before. I'm in California, and so I've used them for clients in to cover San Diego area, and worked out great. But when I posted jobs for the same client in LA, not so great. So it also depends on the area. Indeed is a pretty good one. Another client I used to recruit for, I used them, and that was pretty good. It can get a little bit pricey, but they're not bad to use more regularly for hiring. So that's nice. And they have a lot of tools where you can put kind of pre-assessments on there. They do screening for you. You can screen resumes and things like that, even the people who don't apply. So that's pretty good. Then you have the other sites. If you're looking for a little bit more experience, like someone with maybe like 3 to 5 years experience or a professional, you're going to invest a little bit more money. Then you also have like Monster and Career Builder are pretty expensive. Again, but those are for the more professional positions if you're looking for director or manager. But now, LinkedIn is also a good source for that. But I'll warn you, LinkedIn is very expensive as well. You're talking about $400, $500 for, the post for position. So again, it's a lot less expensive than a recruiter or a staffing agency, but it's going to cost you a bit more. ZipRecruiter is a good medium in between Indeed and a Career Builder, but they can add up as well. Then there's also government sites. Those can be less expensive because it's free, and you guys have that as part of your agencies. Professional organizations are good. If there's a professional site, if I'm looking for an HR person, I may post something on SHRM or something like that, or a professional group where other professionals are going to go and see these job postings. Nowadays with Facebook, and Facebook has certain groups and stuff like that, so you can even do it for least expensive. You can also post jobs on Facebook if you have a company site connected to that, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. And then just your company site. you can have a career section on your company site. And that's kind of like one of also the less expensive ways to do it. The only problem with doing that is you have to make sure that you're driving traffic to your company site. So if you do that, you can link it also to Indeed so that when people go to Indeed, it automatically links them to your company site. So there's different ways to kind of, maneuver that. When I first started HR, we were posting ads in, the LA Times and the Register and Penny Saver. I remember having to count the words to put in to make sure I got the main point across to put into the paper ad. So no one does that anymore. Everything is online for the most part. And then of course, word of mouth is always best, and you get referrals helps as well. You want to make sure, when you're posting jobs, have a descriptive job title, have a descriptive title. Use the highlights. Here again, we have the job description, right? That I told you was not mandatory, but look, it's helping us out again. So use some things from your job descriptions to help post. And that way, immediately what you want. Put the must-haves that you need for that candidate. That's going to come from your essential functions. And it's helpful to include information about the salary and benefits that they're going to be offered. You don't have to, but again, it's kind of like you're selling your job. You want applicants to apply. So the best way to do that is make it attractive for them to apply and to want to inquire more. Do I see some questions in the queue? Do we have some questions?
Okay, it asks for it says, did Desiree say charm for the HR professional trade group? I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
I'm sorry, they said what was SHRM?
I think they thought you said charm, but yeah, it's SHRM. That's an acronym, SHRM. So you could describe.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So I was referring to SHRM. That's our for HR professionals. That's our national organization. It's the Society for Human Resource Management. So, as with many industries, we deal with acronyms. So that's what SHRM is. So sorry if I said that a little bit fast. And then sometimes there's also local professional HR groups, as well as other industry groups. Mm-hmm.
And then the next question is, can you give us an example of a cannabis company violating employee classifications and what consequences they faced? That probably would be hard to do. We'd have to probably try to look for one just because it's such a new industry.
So new, absolutely. And and even here in California, we have those, but it's new. But I'll tell you, from working with different companies and clients over the years, whether it's a engineering office or gaming company or smoke shop or something like that, a lot of these basic things of misclassifications are the same across many industries. So
yep.
It's a lot of the things are the same type of violations in regards to how someone is paid and classified are the most common. Good. Was that the other question?
Let's see. Then there was a question. There's two questions in that question. Also, is there a way to make up the HR series part 1 and receive the certificate if we attend the remaining webinars? So actually, Desiree and I were texting about this earlier this week. So there will be a way, we just haven't decided on the details yet. So I can't say exactly what that will be, but there will be. We're not going to do it again. So it will involve the video. So you can go watch the video. Now, how we go about making sure that you watched the video, we have to decide on that. But you'll be able to, we'll figure something out for you to be able to count that as, yes, I attended all of them, and therefore I can get the certificate for attending all of them.
Right. So yes, work in progress.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we're working out the details of what that will look like. So that information will come in the next few weeks.
Yes. All right. So good. Thank you for the question. So Caesar, everybody's, we're ready this morning, ready to go. So I want to get a little bit involvement here. So Trish, if you don't mind, we're going to be peeking at the chats because I'm going to throw some stuff out. So now that you've got a little bit of training right on job postings, let's test your skills with it now. So we have an example here, and this is actually a live posting I pulled off of Indeed. And I want you to take a look at this. So what do we think? Based off of just kind of briefly what we've gone through, if you guys can share in the comments in the chat here. What are some issues with this job posting that we see? You know, and you could put it, I guess, in the Q&A. I guess it could go in either one. But what are some of the issues that we see with this when we talk about, you know, trying to get someone to, you know, apply for a job? So this one, it says, okay, we have, we're looking at least 2 years of working experience. Okay, that's good. Good English language and writing skills. All right, ability to proofread. Okay, I guess that's what they're defining as, you know, good language, and then computer skills and strong problem solving skills and a desire to exceed. All right. So, you know, this is great and all, but what are some, you know, anybody knows anything that's missing that maybe they would want to have in here? You know, for an office manager title, I look at this and that's great, but it still doesn't quite tell me what I do. It says what I should have, right? Do we have a comment that came through in the chat? Got some
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself while I was typing. Yes, Karen says there is not enough detail of job responsibilities, wages, salary. Corey says the core responsibilities are meeting. Bruce says duties and responsibilities.
Good, absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, if I'm looking for office manager, do we have some other ones coming through?
Bruce just also added education.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, do I need any? Do I need at least a high school or something? I mean, you know, it's great to say good English language. Oh, okay, but that's subjective. But, you know, maybe if I say minimum of a high school diploma or equivalent, or at least an AA degree, you know, if I've gotten to that level, then that probably covers that requirement. But yeah, I look at this and that's like, okay, some of the basics, but it doesn't tell me, I still don't know what the job does, you know, what comes with it, you know, necessarily. So, you know, it's short and brief. It really doesn't have me as an applicant, or any applicant probably want to jump to, you know, apply for that position. Okay, so now we have this one. What are the pluses about this one? What's right about this one? And I'll give you guys also a chance to kind of read through it a little bit.
Okay, so Bruce says specific job duties.
Mm-hmm. And how enticing, right? You know, as other folks are kind of chiming in, you know, just to kind of look at this, wow, you know, if I look at this description for office manager, they're looking for a dynamic individual. Do you know, love a challenge? So come join our team. And the office manager will be responsible for this organization and coordination of office operations. I mean, just the professionalism and how it's kind of laid out for me as an applicant seems, you know, that's the expectation of what I'm going to walk into the workplace. Starts for me as an employee right here. This is like, wow, this company has got it together, right? Now they could be a hot mess behind the scenes, but the perception already is that they're going to have their stuff together. Do we have some other comments popping in, Tricia?
Yes, we do. So Corey said it's well structured, has job duties, requirements, and an intro. And then Bruce said it looks more like accounting versus an office manager position.
Right, and that could be it too, right? And that's another thing too, when we talked about the job description, you know, making sure the duties line up with the title, because once we start really putting duties down, we may see that the position may not match the title, and we want them to connect. But even though the titles aren't always the best indicator of position, but they should be a close kind of hint as to what the position is going to do. But yeah, that's a great point. You know,
and I would even say, as an applicant, if you look at the title and you're like, well, I don't have skills as an office manager, but you've done some accounting in past jobs, you're like, oh, well, I can do all of these things. So regardless of what they call it, I know I can do this job and I should apply.
Because the good thing is that at least that they go through all the details. And I didn't put the bottom part of the job description, but it was nice because under the requirements, they also included the, you know, how many years of experience in certain areas that they were looking for. After that, they listed the benefits, the company benefits someone would get. They listed the pay range for the position. I mean, they really did a good job for the most part of, kind of saying, having me as the applicant look and see, you know what, yes, I'm interested in this. This covers, oh, great, I would get benefits with this. I would get, paid time off. They have holidays, what have you. So it really kind of described the work environment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we get to the interview. I always laugh at these fun memes when I come across them here. So we've got our job descriptions. We've determined that. We've used that to determine the FLA status, whether something's going to be exempt or non-exempt. We've taken a look at it. We've said, you know what, based off of the relationship we need with this position, this person's an employee. We've taken the highlights, we've posted the job, and now we're ready to interview, right? We're almost there. We're almost there. Couple things to do before. We need to discuss what's our interviewing process. Who's going to be involved in the process? If you're the owner, do you want to do all your own interviews? Do you want to have your management maybe do the first level, then you do the second level? Are you going to do group interviews and everyone who works with that person interviews? Will you do what's called peer interviews as well? So determine what that's going to look like, because that's important, because you want to have each candidate have the same type of experience for the most part. And then that's also good, because then it's easier to evaluate one candidate to the next. If I interview a candidate and then and I ask my questions, because there's no set questions, then Trisha interviews, she's going to ask her questions, and Joe's going to interview, they ask their questions with a different candidate. It's going to really be hard to compare and see, who's going to be, how to compare the candidates. But if each of us are part of the process, we have the same questions we're going to ask, it's very easy to kind of see. So those are some of the things that you're going to be looking at. You also want to choose the best location to interview. You want a location that's going to be a private, where there it can be confidential. You're not going to be interviewing in the lunchroom if possible, or at least a quiet corner of the lunchroom if that's the case. You want to make sure that you're not going to have a lot of distractions, so that you guys can both focus. Determine the process and resume review system. Who's going to review the resumes when they come in and kind of screen them? And then how many levels? Is it going to be, we do a phone screen and then an in-person screen, and then we make the offer? Do a couple different people have to interview the person before they're offered? So how many interviews? I once knew someone that had about 9 different interviews in the process. It was insane. From the phone interview to the in-person interview with the local managers, to the in-person interviews with other local managers. Then they flew out of state to meet with the owners in another state. Once they got to the corporate office, there were 3 or 4 interviews with different people at the corporate office. I mean, it was an extensive interview process, and I guess that's good, because when they choose someone, they know they really want them. But that was the most the craziest length of interviewing I've ever witnessed. Yeah, but that's their process, it's their process, and they're consistent with it. So that's the important thing. Have consistent questions. Each candidate gets the same questions. Now, of course, there's going to be follow-up questions that go into that, but at least from the base questions, because in that way you can compare how each candidate answered one to the next. And even maybe on your interview kind of tool that you use, have like kind of rating system and have scoring for candidates. That can be easy to also help kind of compare as well. And then also you want to, once you kind of determine your interviewing process and questions and things like that, already have determined who's going to be part of your onboarding plan. Once we, offer these positions, who's going to complete the onboarding process? Who are they going to train with? How long are they going to train? What's the new hire follow-up? It's always best to have new hire surveys to see what they felt about your interviewing and onboarding process. That way, if we need to make any adjustments to the process that's going to be better, then we can do that as we go along, and that way, we're always improving ourselves. All right, so now you posted the jobs, and I think, we've got our process. I think we're now ready to actually start interviewing. So we posted our jobs. We're getting some, resumes back, and, our applications. And we need to start pre-screening those, right? Because we don't have the time. We already talked about it. It's time consuming. We don't have the time to interview everyone. So we're going to pre-screen. So as we're looking through the resumes, some things we're going to look for errors. And I'm a stickler for this. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily grammatically perfect, but if I see a bunch of misspellings, especially, and I've seen this before, if this is your industry, if this is what you do and you misspell something, that's a problem for me. So that might, be a reason to rule someone out. One or two, we're human, we make errors, but if it's throughout, it's not just a matter of someone not being able to spell, but it's just a matter of this is how you present yourself. You want me to hire you, but this is what you've given me, something that you didn't even bother to use spell check on to make sure it's going to be a good representation of yourself. That's a problem for me. So I'm going to probably rule those resumes out. Then I'm just going to look for the job fit. I'm going to look at their skills and experience. I'm comparing to my job description again, right? And seeing, wow, okay, yeah, they know how to use this materials and these tools, these systems. Okay. Now I'm going to look for inconsistencies. I'm going to look at, do they have any gaps of employment? Am I seeing that they say that they know this, this software, familiar with this, but they don't, they've, listed an older version or something. I'm just going to look for, do things kind of sound right? Because believe it or not, people are not always truthful on their resume. So we're going to look for that on there. But if everything looks good, then we're going to, hey, this person seems like they might be a good fit. Let me check this out. Because again, our time is valuable, and a good way to kind of initially pre-screen or doing telephone screens. And it's not a whole full-length interview. It's going to be just kind of short, a few questions, maybe 15, 20 minutes, just to kind of get a feel for the person and to kind of ask some basic things about their resume, confirm their experience. If it's a technical position, I may already ask some technical things over the phone. For example, if I'm interviewing someone for an HR role, unless it's entry level, right, I'm going to ask them about, are they familiar with some of the recent regulations or laws? If they can't tell me a little bit about, the Fair Labor Standards Act, if I say, well, tell me about how you applied FLSA in your last role. And if they tell me, well, see, that's the wage and hour law, right? That's a problem for me, So I'm going to ask them if those may be in it, just to kind of get a good feel. It's kind of like, okay, do they kind of know their industry? And if they seem like they're good, they have kind of a good, presence over the phone, then we're going to set up a face-to-face interview, or nowadays maybe a Zoom or Skype kind of face-to-face, where we're able to spend more time, go a little bit more in depth and in length in their interview. Okay. And then we can also do assessments. Sometimes some companies do assessments at that level, again, before they bring them in to see. I'm not the biggest fan of kind of personality assessments, but a lot of companies use them, and that's fine. And DISC assessments, they have different assessments where you can have someone take it before they come into an interview, and it helps you format interview questions and tells you what, based off of how they answer their questions, what kind of questions to focus on when you bring them in. Those, and those can be good or bad, because sometimes people just really aren't good test takers, and it's not always a true indicator of how well someone's going to be able to do in the position. And then I know people that are great test takers. They know what to put, they know how to, score high, and they're not a good fit. Sometimes you have positions that are highly technical. I've taken math tests for positions before, especially payroll related, that people can do basic math if that's something that's needed for it. So again, it just really depends on the job and the company, and if you want to, add things like that. When we get to looking at our interview questions, it's important that we focus on, what do we need to know about the person doing the job? So you want to be careful to only ask things that are related to the position, and not anything that could be used to discriminate the person based off those protected classes that we talked about in the beginning. So candidates can be asked about reason for termination of previous employment. That's fair game. Why did you leave your last employer? I see that you've had, 10 jobs in the last 3 years. Can you tell me a little bit about that? You want to see, maybe they have a good reason. I don't know. But it's good to throw it out there. Work schedule. Are you able to work weekends? Can you work holidays? What's your previous work experience? What did you like or dislike about your previous job? What did you like or dislike about your previous boss? How do you like to be managed? Things like that. Those are all fair game. Career interests. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your ultimate goal? You know, tell me about your job duties. I see that you worked at ABC Labs. Tell me a little bit about your role there. You know, what were the parts of your job that you liked? What didn't you like? Why did you leave that employment? Job training, you know, I see you have this certifications or that certifications. Talk about those. A lot of times you want to ask open-ended questions. You want to get them telling about how they've done the job. Again, see, you know, are they truly classified? Because if you say, oh, okay, so you worked in the lab. So, okay, you know about, you know how to work in the lab, you know how to take measurements. Oh, yes, yes, I can do that. Oh, you know how to do this, that, and the other. Yes, I can do that. But if you said, well, tell me how you go about, you know, determining the levels of a chemical or whatever. Well, I do this, that, and the other. Because people can say yes or no real quick, but it may, their way how they learn to do it or know how to do it may not be exactly what's needed for the job. So that's why open-ended is really good. Education, you know, I've asked some people before, wow, you got blah, blah, blah degree. Tell me, what were some of your favorite classes that you enjoyed as part of your program? You know, and then that lets you again a little bit, know a little bit more about that person. Things that you want to stay away from, age or date of birth. And sometimes, you know, hopefully we don't jump out and ask this, you know, and sometimes it happens honestly, right? Someone says, you say, you know, you're creating rapport. They sit down, you say, hi, how you doing? You know, how's your day going? Oh, it's great. Today's my birthday. And there's candidates that interview on their birthday. Oh my gosh, well, happy birthday. How old are you, right? Common thing to just throw out. Or they may say, oh yeah, it's my birthday today. I turned 42. Woohoo. And you're like, wow, congratulations. You don't even look 40s. Oh my goodness. You were blah, 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 blah. And, you know, and then that just gets into territory you don't want to get into. Even if they tell you their age, you say, oh, that's great. Well, happy birthday. And well, you know, that means you're going to probably have a great interview today. You move it on past that. Religion or race, you don't want to get into that. Again, even if the candidate brings things up, you know, briefly address it. Hey, that's great. Moving on to the next. Marital status, children, family. There's no reason to, that's not job related, you know, and again, sometimes these are, they could be just innocent, you know, surname. If I'm interviewing someone with the same last name, oh, Henderson, huh? Well, where's your family from? Are we related? No, we don't need to go into that. That's like, oh my gosh, Henderson, oh, that's funny. Okay, moving on. So we want to be careful with that. Childcare arrangements. It's okay to ask about work schedule. Again, you work weekends and holidays. That's all we care about. How they arrange that, what they do with their kids while they're with us at work, that's on them. We don't need to know about all those details. I once did a hiring training for a doctor's office, and it's a doctor's group that owned, you know, many medical practices. And one of the doctors, who's, bless his heart, was so funny, could not understand why they couldn't ask about childcare arrangements. And he kept saying, well, I need to know, you know, if their children are sick, you know, do they have arrangements to, you know, to have them taken care of so that the employee doesn't call out sick? And how do they keep themselves from not getting sick from their employees at home and bringing it to work? And I mean, he was so concerned. And I said, you cannot ask any of that. So yeah, so it's interesting that what you and I may think automatically, like, no, that makes sense. You can't ask that. There's people out there that ask it. Religious beliefs, there's no need to know that. Status of living arrangements, if they own or rent something, none of that is relatable to the job. So you want to stay away from those. How are we doing? Do we have a question in the queue here?
Yes, it was a question concerning job descriptions. So it's, how do you suggest writing job descriptions that will identify the skills needed for cannabis industry where there won't be the background of horticulture, agriculture, or experience working in the industry?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So what you're taking a look at, if you're hiring for something that's still like relatively new, where you're saying, you know what, realistically, there's not going to be a lot of people out here that have that. What are some of the skills and attributes that may have them learn quickly in that? Maybe someone that's got that's worked in an environment that's scientific. Let's say, I think there's a lot of like sterile and things like that for the environment. So if they've worked in a sterile environment before, for whatever reason, maybe they worked in a pharmaceutical lab or something like that. So what are environments that are similar that they may have picked up some of the same type of skills that might be needed? What are some of the other skills that are needed? You know, someone who is detailed oriented maybe or something. So you want to take a look at it from that view and seeing what else do we need that we can they may not have this direct, but what are some indirect things that'll help benefit us? Like, okay, we can teach them these things, but applicants who have A, B, C, D are going to really, you know, knock it out the park, you know, better and be able to catch up faster than someone who doesn't. So that's kind of a different way to kind of back into it. Of course, if you say, I don't know if this even helps, but if you say someone who's worked in a flower shop before, which of course that's kind of, you know, rare, but, you know, you may see someone who works in a flower shop before, even environments where it may have some of, you know, similar environments or something. Those are some of the ways to do it for an industry that's still growing and not as common.
And could you even include things that might not necessarily have been someone's job, but they're familiar with? For example, the first thing that comes to mind is gardening. And I know someone who's actually applied because she has been growing her own food for quite some time. So she decided to go to apply for a craft grow because she understands growing, because she understands gardening.
You know, that could be an indicator. The only thing, it's kind of hard for someone to represent that, and people's level of how well they garden can differ.
Mm-hmm.
My level of gardening would be a lot different compared to someone who actually understands, you know, the environment of gardening and what plants and succulents grow better here in this environment versus what grows better in the shade, or, you know, seasonal and things like that. I guess if you want someone with a previous experience, maybe in landscaping or something, that something like that might help. Again, I don't know that there's still going to be a lot of applicants with that, but you can, it doesn't hurt to list, you know, in there, you know, applicants who have extensive experience and knowledge of gardening practices, landscaping, and kind of name related industries doesn't hurt. And you always kind of have your preferred level of applicants, right? We always would love to say, oh, I want someone that's got this experience with that and that, but then also be ready to have, if you don't get your preferred, what's the next level of experience and things that you would want them to have. So you have your A candidates and your B candidates and C candidates and things like that. So an A candidate would be someone that's, you know, familiar with that, works in landscaping or gardening and would be familiar with that. You know, hobbies are good, but it just, you know, it just depends on the extent of how much they're involved in their hobby. I was looking at my neighbor's yard the other day. He has a beautiful yard. He probably is very knowledgeable on plants and things, but not all gardening is equal. So
Right.
yeah. So I mean, it doesn't hurt. It could help, but it still could be a little bit, it's hard to have consistency with it, but it can help. So good question, great question. All right, so then we get into, so let's kind of test it, right? So we've kind of got an idea about, you know, what we can ask and what we can't ask. So I'm gonna throw some questions out there and let's see what you guys come up with. We will call, can I ask this? A candidate comes in, you're reviewing their resume and oh my gosh, great, you're bilingual. So we're saying, I see that you're bilingual in Spanish. Wow, that's great. Do you have a Latin background? Can we ask this, yes or no? What does everyone think?
Corey says no.
Okay, Corey, all right. What else do we think? Anybody else coming through?
Somebody typed something in the QA. Oh, Johnny said no in the QA.
Okay. So Johnny and Corey said no. So everybody agree. Oh, we got some other ones in the Q&A popping through. What are they saying?
No from Shaka and no from Ivera. No gets into family history and background.
All right. Let's see if you guys are right. Great job. So yes, and that's exactly right. Does it matter how they're bilingual in Spanish? You know, so again, if we're getting into Latin background, that gets into ethnicities and that just opens up a can of worms that we don't need to open up. So great, great. Next question, can I ask this? I see that you're bilingual in Spanish. Are you fluent? Is it only conversational or can you read and write it as well? Can we ask that?
Ivera says yes. Johnny says yes. Corey says yes.
All right, well, let's see if you guys are right. It's unanimous, so that's a good sign. You are correct. So again, we don't need to know how they know it. We don't know if they're of Latin descent. They could have done study abroad. I wish I did what a lot of my friends did and did study abroad in Costa Rica in college, and they all came back bilingual. So yeah, so whether they did any of that is, you know, however they learned it is fine, but we want to know the level, right? Is it conversational? That could still be of use to the business. I mean, if someone can read and write, you know, then I may ask them, you know, are you familiar with business Spanish terminologies? I learned that that's different, whether someone can hold a professional training or something using kind of business terms versus just casual conversations. So all of those are fair game for the job, right? That's letting me know, can they do that part of the job should I need them? So that's all fair game. All right. Can I ask this? I see that your last job was 5 years ago. What were you doing during that time?
Corey says yes. James says yes. Johnny says yes. Karen says yes.
What do we have? Are they right? Yes, but you know, I warn you that could be a little tricky because what you could get back could be interesting. you know, you know, and really, we just want to see, because sometimes there's a red flag, sometimes gaps of time, things like that. And you know, I've been in HR a while. I'm a little jaded because sometimes mean jail or prison time. Again, doesn't mean it's going to knock them out of the running, but you know, if their answer to me is like, oh, I was just taking some time off. Okay, that's your answer, but you're not telling me, you know, what you were really doing for a reason, so that's a red flag. So, because again, we're looking through red flags too on this. We're looking, can they do the job? If there's anything stands out, that could be a potential issue. They may say, well, I took some time out, I had to deal with some family things or what have you, and that's fine. And we say, oh, okay, well, you know, that's definitely, you know, fair. Or we can ask them as a follow-up, you know, were there any skills and trainings you completed during that time? And they may say, oh, I decided to go back to school, and that's when I finished my undergrad and got my master's. They may come back and say, oh, I took some time off because I was a mom and I told myself when I had my first child, I wanted to raise them until they went into kindergarten and stay home with them. So that's why I could say it could be a little bit tricky, but at least it gives you kind of a heads up what they were doing. Whether you ask follow-up questions onto it, depending on their answer, not necessarily to stay out of that danger zone, but at least it, you know, it covers for you. It kind of puts you at peace of mind that, okay, I asked it, they successfully answered it to my, you know, my knowledge, where I feel comfortable with it, or how they answered it was a red flag for me. So
there's a comment in the Q&A that says reword to say, can explain, ask them to explain the gap. What's your response on that?
Yeah, that's another way of asking it. Yes. Can you explain the gap for the 5 years between, you know, 2015 until now, or, you know, stuff like that? That's great. That's another way that you can word it. Absolutely. All right. Can I ask this? This job is very, you know, physically draining. You know, you're telling the applicant, let me give you a realistic view. And, you know, I just want to be honest with you, requires a lot of standing, repetitive lifting of 25 pounds and other things, you know, and, you know, this is a very, you know, physically demanding field. Do you have any injuries, any previous injuries that we should be aware of?
Okay,
so I ask this?
James said yes. Corey said yes. And Ivera says no. Can you perform the duties with or without reasonable accommodation? Johnny said yes.
All right. Well, so
Sarah said no.
Right. So we cannot. And I did this one because this one's sneaky, right? Because we see how easily we could think that, yeah, that makes sense. I need to know this job is physically taxing, and I need to know, can the person do it? And our friend, was it Udera? We're going to give her a gold star because that's exactly right. We don't need to know about injuries. All I need to know is, can you do this job with or without reasonable accommodation? Because again, we have our Americans with Disabilities Act, that law where we can't discriminate based off of someone's disability or perceived disability. So we want to be careful. And I put that in because I had a client that on his, he was a roofer, and on his job application, that was what he asked, because he said his sister said that he can ask it. And she worked in insurance, and you have to know if people have filed workers' comp injuries before, and you can ask that. And I told him, throw your application away. You absolutely cannot. So absolutely. So you cannot ask that. Now, and I think our friend already kind of gave away the answer for us on this one, but same question, but we're going to reword it. Are you able to do these items with or without reasonable accommodation? Absolutely. This is fair game. You can ask this, because that's all we're asking about, is if they feel like they can do the things of the job. And if they say, oh yes, no problem. Now, it's not to say that they're going to say right there, oh yes, I have back surgery, but I have a back brace. And as long as you let me wear that back brace, I can do it. We don't need all those conversations. All it is they're just saying, oh yes, I can do that. That's no problem. Yeah, I did a lot of that stuff in my last job. Then you're good to go.
You would be amazed at the things that people discriminate over. My job I applied for very, very, very early on, I was a teenager, was at an ice cream place. And they would not hire me because I was left-handed.
Oh my goodness.
And all of the ice cream scoops were right-handed.
And they didn't want to buy you. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yep.
That's an interesting one. I have not heard that before. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question before we move forward. Someone asked, how is reasonable accommodation defined? That's a very good question.
So reasonable accommodation, great question. Yes, reasonable accommodation is something that could be as simple as kind of like we mentioned at the beginning, where if I'm a receptionist and I have some issues with hearing, reasonable accommodation is even just someone allowing me to wear my hearing aid at work. That could be as simple as that. A reasonable accommodation, there's so many different types, but just kind of the physical ones. Reasonable accommodation can be a type of reduced schedule. It can be allowing someone to use a back brace or a dolly. Those are types of, again, just minimal. Not all reasonable accommodations need like a whole kind of discussion with it. There's some that we just do immediately just to kind of help and for safety reasons. Reasonable accommodation, could be, I'm trying to think of some other ones I've done. I had an employee that had some issues breathing, and the doctor said yes, that they could work their hours of work, but while they're there, they need to have an oxygen tank on the work site. And again, that's something that the company didn't have to provide, but we had to provide the ability to be able to, for the person to bring it. Reasonable accommodation could be a reduced schedule. Here's some reasonable accommodations I've had recently with companies where we had an employee that had irritable bowel syndrome, and he needed the ability to use the bathroom more frequently and work close to the bathroom. A reasonable accommodation could be more frequent bathroom breaks. There was a lawsuit against the grocery chain for a cashier because she had some type of bladder issue. And, when she had to use the bathroom, she had to use the bathroom and had to be allowed more frequent breaks to go do that. And there was a manager that was managing her who was not aware of that. And the one time that he didn't let her do that, she had to accident herself, and she sued and won because they did not accommodate that accommodation. So there's so many different types of accommodation. It doesn't always mean that they are reasonable. You take a look at, unless there's like a hardship with that, but then the company would have to prove that it's a hardship. So it could be a change in office. So let's say you have a 2-story building and someone's office is on the 2nd floor. And let's say there's no elevator in the building, and someone gets in a car accident and they're in the wheelchair for a couple of weeks while they're healing. They come back to work, they broke both their legs, and they're in the wheelchair, for example, and their office is usually on the 2nd floor, and you may be able to temporarily accommodate them and have them work from the 1st floor because there's no elevator. You know, it doesn't say that, or it could be a permanent, you know, thing where someone's always in it. It doesn't say, well, hey, can you put in an elevator or lift so I can get to the second floor? That would probably be an undue hardship. That would not be considered a reasonable accommodation. So, you know, those are kind of some types. So there could be all, you know, different types, and you just have a discussion with the employer applicant as to what might be needed. And I'll tell you, it could even come in an interview time where I've had candidates interview who are hard of hearing. So when we've interviewed, we'd have to use a service to do the interview, but to do the phone interview, the initial screening, and that's a type of accommodation even for candidates. So it starts even before they get hired with someone. So does that, I hope that answers the question. Is there any follow-up questions to that? Okay, and what we do, I'm sorry.
I just press send on the typed answer. And
okay.
So whoever asked that, I didn't even look at the name. Whoever asked that, if you have any follow-up questions, you go ahead and put them in the Q&A box.
Right, and we'll go into more of that too in regards to ADA accommodation and the leave of absence seminar. I believe that is the 5th one, I believe, in the series. So I think that's the end of June, I want to say. So we do get more into that because time off can be a type of accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. All right, interviews, do's and don'ts. So we do want to begin the interview with rapport building questions, and they may seem silly, but sometimes it eases us into it and the applicant. You know, oh, did you have any problems finding the place today? Do you have any issues with parking? How's the weather? You know, if there's you know, big sporting events going on, if you're in the World Series for something, oh my gosh, I've been watching the World Series. What do you think about that? You know, just stuff and kind of lighten up the tone. Set up the interview, you know, so you know, say a little something like, well, thank you for coming in today. You know, I really appreciate you taking the time to interview with us. You know, I read through your resume and we're really excited to learn more about you. I'm going to go through and just ask some questions. We'll talk about a little bit about your history, and I'll ask kind of like some of the things that you've, you know, some tools and skills that you've learned in the jobs. And I have this notepad here. I'm going to be taking notes as we go along. Please feel free to keep talking while I'm taking notes. Don't mind me. And then at the end of the interview, I'll ask if you have any questions. But if you have any questions throughout, you know, feel free to ask throughout the interview. And then we'll talk about next steps. You kind of set the tone of what they're going to expect. If you have someone else in on the interview, you know, introduce that person. It's like, yes, this is Bob. This is our director of finance. He sits in on the interviews as well. And we're going to both be asking you questions. And, you know, because I've sat in interviews before where they've had other people in there and it's like, well, who is this person? And it makes the candidate nervous. So, you know, kind of walk them through because we want to get them comfortable so that they're talking and sharing with us. You know, like I said, explain to the candidate that you'll be taking brief notes. Do not take notes on the resume or application. Even though you legally do not have to have a resume or application, if you do, it now becomes a legal document and becomes part of that employee file. And if you're ever, let's say, sued and that is subpoenaed, then your notes will be on there. So always take notes separate because technically that doesn't have to be part of the employee file. So a lot of times for a company, you know, when we've had to respond to a lawsuit, I'm taking out those notes and I'm only sending the legal documents that we have. So just a FYI on that, because you'll see managers that'll write, you know, decent things in the notes. Like when I first started in HR, I didn't know any better. And I would write on there, person dressed professionally, person was late to interview. And as they answer questions, make notes in the margins and stuff on the resume. But as I grew in my HR career, I knew not to do that. So, so just a FYI on that. Be aware of federal and state regulations that affect what you can and cannot ask the applicant. You want to be friendly, but you want to be professional. You don't want to get too comfortable and too, you know, too non-professional. So remain as objective as possible. Try to hide your personal feelings because you may get a candidate that you really connect with and you guys hit it off and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know this person. But, you know, again, try to hide that because the next candidate that you get may be even better. You don't want to give that candidate or by chance informally offer the position to them. And if you decide not to, that could create some issues. You want to try to mostly ask open-ended questions. You know, that will let you know more about the person. Allow the candidate to do the majority of the speaking. You're asking leading questions and then they're going to give you the full-on kind of sermon of their answer. And then you're going to ask follow-up questions. Well, why is that? Oh, that's interesting. Well, explain to me. So when you dealt with that difficult customer, and they were mad. I mean, tell me how you diffused that? Wow, that sounds amazing. And you did what? And so just kind of, tell me more about that. And so you really want to get them talking. And there's going to be yes or no questions, of course, that you ask. Do you have this certification? Yes. Do you have 3 to 5 years experience in this? No, So there will be some, but you really want to have majority of open-ended. Take brief notes, and we talked about that in a separate paper. Hold the interview with a private place, and please, you want to be prompt on making the decision. Also, but if you know that your process is going to take a while, warn the applicant ahead of time. You may tell them, just to let you know, you're, one of the first people that we've interviewed for this position, and we're going to be taking the next couple weeks to interview. So you should be hearing back from us within 2 to 3 weeks regarding our decision if we're going to move forward with you or not. So that lets them know in their mind, okay, I expect to hear from them 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not going to be waiting by the phone, or calling. I used to have candidates that would call sometimes, even when I told them every day, hey, how you coming with that? How you, So at least it takes that away, and they kind of have an idea. Or if it's the holiday times, right? People are on vacation. And you're letting them know, like, yeah, we want this position to start beginning of the year. So we're interviewing now, and I'll warn you, a lot of people are in and out on vacation, so the process may take longer than we'd like, but we will keep you, posted, every step of the process. So again, just having that courtesy for them, because, we've all probably at some point been on the other end, and there's no fun applying for a job and interviewing and you don't hear anything back. Whether you got it, didn't get it, something. We always like some conclusion, or you're moving forward in it. The interview don'ts. Don't make judgments based on a single trait. We're human, and we tend to kind of be put off by, something. So we want to make sure if someone, makes a comment, or, even if, you're doing general rapport and you're like, yeah, gosh, thank you for meeting with me on Zoom. And I know these are crazy times, right? Oh my gosh, yeah, these Democrats, they're trumping up these things. And, it's crazy that we have to do this because they made this, pandemic up. And it's like, whoa, and, depending on your take on something, you might say, yeah, I've already ruled this person out, but you don't want to base on a single comment they make, a single trait or something like that, because does their views on this have anything to do with the job? If this is for a medical environment, maybe, but, otherwise it may not, so you want to be careful, of course, of being too friendly. You'll be careful with showing your candidate favor or disfavor. We want to be, just kind of very diplomatic about how we kind of do. You want to be friendly and courteous, but not too much either way. Of course, be careful of asking too many closed-ended questions with yes or no. Don't accept general answers. If you say, well, tell me a little bit about, customers, your customer service experience. I noticed in your last job, you worked at a call center. Did you ever have to deal, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult client or customer? Oh yeah, I used to get difficult customers all the time, and, they'd call, I'd listen to their concern, try to help and solve the problem, and then that usually worked. Okay, well, they answered the question, but that tells me nothing about their problem-solving skills and their ability to diffuse situations. So we're going to ask more about that, right? I'm going to ask a probing question and follow-up question. Wow, okay, great. Well, can you give me one example? Can you choose a specific situation with, a customer that called very upset, and can you walk me through about how you diffuse that situation? Okay, now they're going to have to give you a little bit more detailed of an answer. Continue to talk when the applicant hesitates in replying. I get this all the time. If I ask them, so tell me, what do you feel are your 3 strengths? What are 3 attributes you could bring to this role? It's so hard for people to kind of brag about themselves, and it's hard for them to talk about their weaknesses. So a lot of times they're going to take time to think. So I'm going to allow them the time to think, and, just human nature, right? We get weird with awkward silences. So, I even say, that's okay, take your time. We've got some time. Go ahead and, you can come up with just a couple things for me. And I'm not going to let them off the hook. I want them to at least give me a couple of responses. And then we'll be careful of making promises. Oral statements could be interpreted as a binding contract. And just be careful about how you talk about things. If you say, yeah, when you work for us, you're going to see we have great benefits, or yeah, we're a team. And I could see, oh, you could fit right in with our team. Just comments like that. You really want to be careful, because they're going to think, oh, yeah, I got this job. And I've had friends and family that have interviewed, and they're like, I don't understand. You know, the person said they felt like it'd be a great fit. They could see me here. They couldn't wait to see me join the team, and I haven't heard anything. And they, you know, the company chose someone else, but this person felt like they had the job. So be careful with that. And then we want to execute interview follow-up. We want to review, complete our notes. You know, if we have an evaluation form or a rating form where we're rating candidates or something on it, we want to fill that out and, you know, kind of narrow it down to our top candidates, decide, are we going to do an additional interview with them, with our final candidates? Can we make a decision where we're at? Maybe to help determine, we're going to verify applicant information and do kind of check the references that they've included in previous employment, see if there are any discrepancies there. And then we may conduct additional background screening. Now, this part are typically going to be with offer. Now, the degree confirmations and certifications, confirming those, we can do those before the offer, because usually the person will have signed approval with that when they do the application. But some of the other things will wait, like criminal checks have to be with offer. But we're going to do the interview, the extra interview follow-up. And then we're going to go ahead. We've decided to make our hiring decision, and we're going to extend an offer. We want to make sure that it's job-related reasons and that this person is the best fit for the position. In the back of our mind, we kind of want to consider, if something goes wrong, how do we defend how this person, you know, stood out over the others? And if we can easily say, well, yeah, these are the applications that we got for this position and resumes. And as you can see, this person clearly had more of the things that we're looking for, more related experience, you know, and that's one of the best ways to choose that. You're going to make the offer verbally. You know, you call them and, you know, hey, Joe, do you have a moment? And I just want to let you know that, you know, thank you for coming in. You applied to interview for our office manager position. And we'd like to say that we'd like to offer you the position. You know, as we discussed in person, the position, you know, pays $20 an hour. It has full benefits once you've been here after 90 days. And we need someone to start July 1st. How does that sound? And Joe may come back and say, oh, that's great, I accept, thank you, I look forward to, you know, to working with you guys. Or he may come back and say, wow, I was really hoping to get 22 for the position. You know, is this, you know, is this negotiable? Is the start negotiable? We may say, you know what, that's within range. Yes, we can do that. Or they may need to think about it. So we kind of want to get a verbal agreement, and then whatever we verbally agree, then that's when we want to put the offer letter in writing. Because, you know, I've seen times when companies, they're like, oh, I'm going to send you the offer letter. And then the offer is not immediately accepted. And there's some negotiations and different offer letters are going out and back and forth. I'm just a fan of, let's get an agreement verbally and I can confirm it in writing. And the offer letter is what that is what it says. It's an offer letter. It's just clarifying the terms of employment. It is not a contract. When the contract starts having end dates to it and terms and all, you know, kinds of other stuff to it, then that could be a contract, and we want to be careful of that, because then we override our ability to be more flexible with at-will employment. It's not to say that you can't have a contract, but then once you have that, then you're kind of, you know, bound to it. Some positions may require a contract though, and if so, work with a labor attorney on putting that together. That way, you know, you're protected in that. Okay, and then inform unselected applicants that they did not get the position. This is one of the biggest fails that a lot of companies don't do. I call it sending the thanks but no thanks letter. You can call them and let them know. You can email them, but at least close the loop with them, because I'll tell you, it's nothing. I've been on, you know, that side of it. I think we all have it. We've interviewed, we're excited about a position, and we just don't hear anything, you know, and that's no fun. So at least send them a letter or something, letting them know that they did not get the position. All right. So nothing we do more is more important than hiring, developing people. At the end of the day, you bet on people, not strategies. You know, the right people in the right place at a company can literally make or break a company. No matter how good your services and your product is, if you don't have the right people in there in the right places and motivated and working hard, they could sink a ship very easily. So even the best made ships. So. All right, so now we've talked about, we've got our job descriptions, we know what type of position, we've effectively, you know, recruited for that position, and we've made the offer, they've accepted, and now we're going to bring them on board with us. So now what's our onboarding? And again, this is another fail a lot of times companies do. You know, we get so excited to hire someone. We're looking to bring them on because we need them, right? Which is over hiring. We need someone to immediately get that in position. But let's take a step back, kind of slow it down, because the more work you put in up front with an employee, the better the retention. So it goes together. When you set them up right, they tend to be acclimated better. They're going to have a better understanding of their position, the company, and they're going to be a better fit. I can't tell you companies, you know, when companies have high turnover, you know, and I have a client now, she has high turnover. And I said, well, let's talk about your onboarding practice. Well, we have this, that, and that. And I said, okay, so they go through the training and then what? Well, sometimes they do the training, but sometimes we have to delay it. We just need to get them out on the road. And I said, okay, so then how do you go back and train them? Well, we try to get the trainer, we try to this and to that. And I said, well, you know, if someone comes in, they don't know what they're doing, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to leave. And if they're not getting that feedback, they feel like they don't know the job, you know, they're rushed in, they're rushed around. That's, you know, a mess. So a lot of times I see someone with high turnover, that's where I start, is the onboarding process, especially when it's beginning of employment, when it's less than 90 days. That tells me that's onboarding and something wrong with the hiring process. And then so once they're longer and there's more, you know, more things or a certain department, then we look at other things. But it's important that we do this right. A new onboarding process is integrating a new employee with the company, its culture, getting new hire tools and information, you know, that they can become a productive member of the team there. It's just not a one day or one time event. This is ongoing. You know, yes, it starts the first day, but this is, you know, like the first full year, there's still onboarding type activities. The process of onboarding new employees are one of the most critical factors of ensuring that someone's going to be productive and that they're going to stay with you. Because we talked about how long it takes to bring someone on, all the resources you're doing, there's a cost to that. And so to get your ROI back on that hire and that process, you can't have them walking out your door 30, 60, 90 days later. That's throwing money out the window. So we want to make sure that we do it right the first time. That way we have someone that's going to be with us for a little bit of time. So you want to take a look at consideration for setting up our onboarding plan. When will onboarding start? How long is the official program going to last? You know, what impression do you want them to walk away with at the end of the first day? Do you want them to walk away with, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? They're not ready for me. They don't even have my email set up. They don't have an office space for me yet. And I mean, at companies, they do this. And then they wonder why people are not successful in their roles. So what impression do you want them to leave? Do you want them to go home and say, wow, I am so excited. That's an awesome company. Or, oh my goodness, what did I get into? So some other things you want them to do is, you know, what do you want employees need to know about your environment, the culture and work environment? You know, all of that doesn't happen by accident. There's things that you do to inform them of this and to give them that, you know, that feeling of what kind of culture it is. What role will management and other employees play in the process? You know, is it only managers involved? You have them sit with other team members and coworkers to get trained and learn about what they do. You know, I've worked at companies where I came in at one position, but they wanted you to spend some time sitting with other people in the company. That way you got a good idea about what everybody did. Or as part of like the orientation class, they'd bring different departments in, because then you knew how your role fit with all these departments and how all these pieces work together. What kind of goals do you want to set for new employees, and how will you gather feedback on the program and measure how effective onboarding is? And that's really good with kind of doing an entry interview and kind of do it ongoing. That way you're immediately kind of checking the progress of how this person's doing. And if there's any gaps in the system, you can catch it so that you can either redirect how that person's experience is, and you can also fix it for the next one. So we're taking a look at our onboarding first day goals. So some of our first day goals, we want a welcoming environment, right? We want to walk them in. We want to take them around, introduce them to who they're going to be working with. You know, give them a tour. You know, I can't tell you how many places it's like, you know, you get in and you have to use the bathroom and you're like, okay, where's the bathroom? You know, who do I see for this? Who do I see for that? You know, so, you know, walk them around. Now, will they remember it all? No, but at least it gives them that comfortability. And then other employees kind of get to see who they are. Oh, hey, there's a new face in the office. Oh, that's so-and-so. Hi, nice to meet you. If there's anything you need from me, you know, this is what you can, you know, visit me for, what have you. So just makes them feel welcome. Get them familiar with the company, maybe take some time to go over the company history, talk about the different products or services maybe that they offer. So those are kind of all the things that should be kind of built in to the first day, giving them that big picture. Provide them some information about the company benefits, programs that are offered, policies and procedures. If you need to go for dress code, this is a great time to start going through the handbook. We'll talk a little bit more about that in future trainings, importance of the handbook, but this is a great time to go through that because your handbook would have all this stuff in there. Discuss the position and its role within the company. Discuss maybe who's going to be maybe directly reporting to them, who they report up to, chain of command. You know, there's so much stuff that goes on in the interview process. They're probably interviewing with other companies. Things are fuzzy. So let's get them, let's, you know, bring it in and kind of talk about, okay, you're here. So now what? This is what you do. This is what you work with. And then make sure that they have the work tools as much as possible on day one. You know, them getting there and having to wait, you know, I've seen where people have had to wait weeks for laptops, you know, they don't have their cell phone, they don't have system access, you know, how are they supposed to be successful? They're sitting there, that's time that's wasted on both the company time and money and for that employee, you know, so we want them to be successful. Let's give them the tools. They can take those first couple of days to start learning how to access systems and use their, you know, their emails to start, you know, getting that set up appropriately and things like that. Okay. All right. What questions do we have?
I don't see any in the Q&A yet.
Okay.
But just a couple of things I wanted to bring up while we wait for people to finish typing if they're typing questions. One is that a lot of you guys are probably ahead of the game if you already submitted your license application in this last round, because we know you put together some sort of handbook and policies and procedures to submit with your license application. Just because you did it already doesn't mean that you can't benefit from this, because you can change it, because that's a type of document that's a living organism. It's going to grow and change and adapt to the necessary changes that come into play with your businesses. So you'll be able to change it based on some of the things that you learn in our upcoming sessions as it relates to that.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Oh, now we have a question.
Okay.
So, question is, does every type of cannabis facility in Illinois, dispensary, craft grow, infuser, have to be ADA accessible? For instance, if the dispensary has a basement but no elevator, is that a violation of ADA requirements?
It is not. So it's kind of two different things, because you have the employment side of it, but then you may have local business ordinance. Like, for example, even in some cities here, some cities will say if the building is 3 levels or below, it doesn't require an elevator. Some may say if it has more than 3 levels, and it does. Some may say, well, if it was built after this thing. So that's going to be more of like kind of a city encoding. So if where your location is going to be, if it doesn't require that, then ADA won't require that. And because that would be an undue hardship to have to put one in. So that's kind of like what you're looking at if someone needs that. And that might be something that you put in a, you know, as a part of the work environment. You may say not elevator, office located or business located in the basement, not elevator accessible or something like that. That way people know, oh, okay, I'm not going to be able to get down there or something. So, or that might be something that you mentioned in the phone screening, but ADA would not require you to have to put something in if city and other ordinances do not.
And then the second part of the question is it permitted if the limited access area and all areas that the customers utilize in the facility are ADA accessible, but the restricted area access areas for employees are not ADA accessible? For example, hallways or bathrooms do not follow ADA required measurements.
Right, great question. And that's another one too that's going to be, again, default to the local ordinances, because some of them may require for customers. Like you said, they have a ramp to get in there, have wheelchair doors. Sometimes they'll say it throughout the facility. Sometimes it's saying where customers access. So that's going to be something that's going to be more of a code and kind of zoning issues locally versus ADA. Great question.
I'm still typing the answer.
Okay.
So you, all right, so the next question, those were responses. So the person just said thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
And then there was also a thanks for offering this. So yeah, we want to make sure that everybody has everything they need to be successful in this space, especially because we know that many of you are not the large corporate types that are coming into this space. And so you're not going to have, you know, an army of attorneys and the ability or means to hire, you know, HR manager and all these different roles, especially if you're just starting out. So anything that we can do to provide you any resources that you may need, we will most certainly do that to the best of our ability. Any other questions? You can go ahead and type those now. And I'm going to pull up. Our next session is on,
Is it June the 10th, I believe?
Yep, June 10th. It's on managing performance and performance reviews, and it's at 6 p.m. Okay, we do have another question. How does the government ensure we are compliant with all of these regulations? Are there documents we must submit, and if so, how often? Oh, very good question too.
So you said, how do they make sure that you're in compliance? Yeah, so that's a great question. Sometimes you'll have, through audits, through complaints. Now, and that's a great question because a lot of times they're not going to come knock on your door, right? They just don't have the manpower and say, hey, show me your labor poster, show me your handbook. A lot of times it will come out of complaints. There's some industries that are more regulated and more audited than others. Like, for example, for safety construction sites, right? Those are going to be audited by OSHA more than others just because of the risk. So it just depends if it's something that requires a lot of regulations, and they just may have random checks. And sometimes for certain things, you may have someone driving by and decide to, to pop in. If you're a highly regulated industry, which it sounds like you guys might be, then you might, especially initially, you might see some visits. So you want to have definitely your I's, dotted and T's crossed. And then also, the biggest time usually are going to be employee complaints. That's the biggest time. But again, highly regulated industries will get visits as well. And
this is a heavily regulated industry. So, one of the things that you have to be mindful of is that, and I don't know that this is actually the case, but it could be the case, is that if someone comes in from one agency and they see something that they know is a blatant violation for another agency, then I expect that they would probably make a phone call because they're doing their due diligence as a compliance auditor for their agency, and they're trying to protect, the public.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, and because this is a heavily regulated industry, you would see that. And then someone just sent me something in chat as it relates to dispensaries, for an example. There are lots of audits that they go through, and that the state police will just pop in on a regular basis.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I was just saying that that the state police pop into the dispensaries on a regular basis, and there are lots of audits on the dispensaries already. So here's the thing, because this is a very new industry, also because it's federally illegal at the moment, and because there's probably lots of apprehension still, even though the law passed doesn't necessarily mean that it's well embraced. Right. There's going to be lots of eyes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like, you know, a great point, there are other agencies can refer. So let's say you have an agency that comes in, you know, excuse me, OSHA or something, they're coming in just to make sure, check your, you know, your postings, whatever it is for safety setup. And they are like, you know, and they're talking with employees and they notice some other, you know, some other things, and this, you know, or something's a red flag to them. Yeah, they can very easily call another agency in and say, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I was over there checking their OSHA posters or whatever, but I don't know. Employees are telling me that, oh yeah, I'm an independent contractor, and that seems kind of weird that everyone is working in here. Is that allowed? You know, you just never know. So you definitely want to. That's another way that they can do it, especially. Yeah.
And also, just a reminder, since we happen to be bringing up, you know, all of the different agencies that could be popping in on you. We do have the deck from our earlier presentations on common compliance mistakes that is available in the Dropbox right now. So you can go and pull that out because it has like the 10 most common compliance mistakes and also the fines and whatnot for each of those and the different agencies. It brings up a lot of the different agencies in that presentation.
All right. Well, thank you guys for your great questions and for participation. This was, I love doing these trainings because it's always great when I know that the attendees can directly apply this. Please feel free to follow me on my Facebook and Instagram sites. It'd be great. I share a lot of tips and HR things on those. And we look forward to seeing you at our future trainings and sessions, and as we continue to work through the employee life cycle.
So thank you so much, Desiree, for doing this. If you guys have any questions, or if you, one of the other things we did a lot for, and we'll probably start implementing these in closer to the time that people actually are awarded their license. So, you know, maybe towards the end of next month or beginning of July, is some one-on-ones with Desiree. So, but we have a limited amount of time for those. So it's really going to be like, if you actually have some stuff to discuss and have documents and everything already that you're going to like push through, I don't want to like just have her on the phone just answering general questions, and then somebody who really needs more time doesn't get the opportunity to have that time. So if you're interested in that, or if you feel like you need that at any point, we'll have to come up with like a vetting process so we get as many people in as possible. And you can send an email to us at cannabis@the-prep-school. You guys know the email address at this point. So, or you can send it to me. And I know you all have gotten emails from me, Trisha@the-prep-school. And so we will get you some FaceTime with Desiree when you need it, so that, you know, you can get all the support that you need. So thank you, everyone. I hope you are staying safe. We have like, what, a week left just about of our lockdown in Illinois before we're free to congregate with 9 other people. So have a blessed day and great weekend. Oh, wait. Desiree, you're the host, so you have to end the meeting. I forgot that I made you host.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Because I was about to leave, and I'm like, it didn't say leave for all, in for all. And I'm like, why is that? Because I made you host.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.